In order to make our meetings more efficient, we are limiting public comment to the beginning of the meeting, the public to be heard section. Select board meetings are in the public, not of the public. There will occasionally be agenda items where we will ask for public comment. Tonight, we will allow some commentary on the slower, safer streets item with Bernie Paquette. Oh, I deleted my little line. If you're on Zoom, please only use the Zoom chat for things like technical issues, like I can't raise my hand, I can't come off mute. Please don't ask questions or place comments into the chat as it's distracting. None of this is designed to limit public comment, only to make our meetings more efficient. Now, that's my normal spiel. Another thing that we need to realize is that despite your eyes, we are actually now a 5-member select board, which means that there's some additional things to be aware of for this meeting and the next meeting. So even though the other 2 members aren't here, all motions will need 3 members to vote yes. Which brings me to the next comment. Catherine, I need to ask you if you feel the need to recuse yourself from the Bentley Lane waiver discussion.
I was going to, because I am a budding landowner, because I didn't want the vote to be questioned by anybody. But because they've been waiting a long
If that's your
time.
inclination, I would suggest that we move that agenda item to July, because 2 of us, even 2 yes and we
Yeah,
is not
because I
it's
felt
not a
like
motion.
but but I feel bad now.
This is only the case for this meeting and the next meeting until we hopefully in the first July meeting, which I also want to talk about later. By July, we plan to have 5 members, and so this will be a little less awkward for them. I will allow questions on that, because it is a little confusing. It took me a bit to understand it.
You know, I mean, if people think that I can go ahead and vote without wrecking the vote, wrecking.
I think if you were thinking about, I think if you were planning to recuse yourself, you shouldn't unrecuse yourself based on.
Yeah, I was
So
planning.
unless there's something, unless 2 meetings makes a catastrophic difference in timing.
Yeah, because they want to build the driveway, I know that.
So I think the best move is we have to move that agenda item, and I do apologize to those people.
If it is catastrophic to move it to July, I don't know.
Are they here?
Yeah, they should be here.
Which item?
Review and consider approval waiver request for 30 Bentley Lane.
I'll speak on, I think the sooner a decision, the better, but it's ultimately, your choice.
Is a month gonna bankrupt you?
Right.
Pretty quick notice here to absorb
Yeah.
all this, but we've been delayed once already, but
Yeah.
I understand if Catherine is not comfortable.
Well, I just don't want the vote to be questioned, because I am in a butter.
So I don't think we can override your decision. But you don't mind if you give it a few minutes before you give us our answer. But,
Except when you were 3
yeah,
people and then go to 5, and what can you change? Now.
Say that again?
So we need 3 yes votes. We need 3 yes votes in order for any motion to pass.
Right.
So anybody that recuses or votes no, the motion fails. If you have 5 people, you can have 1 or even 2 people vote no or recuse, and you have your 3, you'd have the majority vote of yes.
so what you're saying is the odds are better to wait.
No.
No.
If Catherine recuses herself, we can't do it. We can't do anything. Eric and I, Catherine, even if we both say yes, that doesn't matter. There weren't 3 votes.
I don't think
Yeah,
that's
he's
gonna
right.
come into play. This is
It-
pretty,
No. I'm telling you I'm not saying this is what's gonna probably happen. I'm explaining the way the board exists for the next month. Which is that we cannot take any actions because there's 5 of us here, even though there aren't. For anything to be done by the board, the three people who are present all have to agree, all have to vote yes to take any action. Regardless of what,
The agenda item moves to July. Let's move on. Sorry about that. We should have warned you about it. I didn't think of it until
I didn't either.
I was processing it last night and
you're sure the rules are.
we,
We.
I checked and double checked.
VLCT.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's weird.
We'll see you next month.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like, we're doing it.
Okay, technicalities out of the way. We are now in public to be heard. In public to be heard, I'd like you to address the board. I want you to feel free to share your opinions and your thoughts, but please do not accuse our volunteers or our staff of lying or disparaging any of the effort that has gone into whatever project you might be vocal about. Do I have any public to be heard? Brent,
Okay, I'll just sit here. So I'm Brent Anderson, Silly Hill Road, and just to follow up, so we've had some discussions. I was here last month. And actually, Paula had people come and look at it. The question would be, is in the past, a resident was able to talk to the road supervisor. And that was pretty efficient. It would take a couple minutes, we'd have a discussion, things would get done. That didn't happen previously for a few years.
Bless you.
We just might want to think about that because as a resident, I've highlighted some issues and I'm concerned about certain things. And because I don't hear back, I spent an hour just to fill up the ditch so that the erosion isn't so bad on my property. I put stakes up because I'm worried they're going to come in and remove my stone wall. I'm worried there's no signage and someone's going to have an accident. And because we're just not able to have that communication, I think it slows things down. So this might be something we consider going forward.
thank you. Chuck, you don't need to come up if you'd like to speak.
Are you making any decision today on the regional planning map?
That is on the agenda and there's a suggested approval or.
So you're looking for input before you discuss it and before the presentation now? Or? Because you don't want comment after the presentation.
That's a good point. Maybe we should add that one to the one we allow comment for. You're right.
Okay,
After the
thank you.
presentation,
I amend my initial comment.
Thanks.
Other public to be heard? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to speak to the Raceway Road issue, whether that's now or when
Go
it's
ahead.
on the agenda.
Go ahead.
Barbara Merrill, I lived on Raceway Road for 4 years. And I appreciate the work that the volunteers have done trying to come up with a plan to make the road more safe for cyclists, dog walkers, kids, everybody, buggy pushers. My concern, which I voiced at the meeting at the library, is that this proposal, unfortunately, in my eyes, would actually make things less safe. And having raised 3 kids on that road and watched a lot of traffic go by, a lot of kids on bikes, that is a real concern. They have stated measurements of the road, which really vary from place to place, from Route 15 down to Valley's Edge, I believe is the area we're talking about. Some places it's more like 19 feet. And for my house, it's 17.5 feet. And that's with no snow. And my concern is, and I have a couple of pictures. If anybody wants to look at them more closely. This is in front of my house. There's our 2 cars and one of my kids, Aiden's, standing about 4 feet out from the edge of the road, which is the measurement of the walkway plus about 3 or 4 inches for the measurement of the bollard base. So it's a pretty narrow, and I would not feel comfortable passing them there. Looking at it from on the other, with the walkway on the other side of the road, this is our car, this is our trailer, which is wider than a normal car, but not wider than a UPS truck or Amazon truck or whatever. And that's not very far, and I wouldn't pass a kid with 6 inches to bear. I don't care where they were, I would wanna be moved over. And then the other picture I have is just another angle. I have to pass these around, that just shows the spacing and how close 2 vehicles would be with the space and the bollards. So, it's a rural road, it's a rural neighborhood. The 40 years I've lived there, we have not had an accident along Route 15 in terms of road, pedestrian, cyclists. We did have a dog get hit, that was a different issue. But that's the only one that I know of, and I would just really advocate for looking at how things would actually work with real life people and vehicles and kids riding bicycles in a row down the middle of the road, as opposed to what it looks like on paper. And that's it.
Thank you for your comments.
I'll pass these around. I'm a teacher.
Someone has a question on Zoom.
It looks like there's a Judy Wade.
Thank you. I'm representing Jerry Hill community, which is just around the corner on Brookside. And many of our residents walk along Raceway to go to Jericho Market. Their comments are very similar to the ones we just heard. Is for one thing, the road is built up so high there with frequent dumps of earth to fill in the potholes, that there are big gullies on each side. So some of the people who live here are worried about being forced off the road into that gully and have actually stepped off the road to let big trucks go by and hurt themselves. So I think our comment is similar, is it's not really wide enough to do this work unless there's the gullies are filled in and some more land is taken. I think they're quite worried about just being forced off into one of those dips there, and none of, a lot of them are not stable on their feet. So, and then thinking about families pushing a stroller, similar concern is that they be forced off into the gully. Now they can get onto an area and just wait until the trucks go by. But with this added expansion of sidewalk, they're concerned that the grading isn't proper for it. I think that's their concerns.
Thank you for your comments. Other public to be heard? Ma'am?
My name is Nancy Spear. I'm also on Raceway Road. Without repeating some of the comments already made, one concern I have is to what degree the road Jericho Town crew has been involved in this, because with the more work that they are doing now to help prevent potholes, et cetera, and wintertime filling, using different types of materials, et cetera, and the measurements. it seems as if the road crew would need to be a huge part just in maintenance. I also have measured. I have similar concerns that Barbara has, and my other observation is that, and having lived there for over 20 years now, that most people who are walking, biking, enjoying and using that road now have learned to avoid commuter time and avoid garbage truck time, so that we can still enjoy that road for the purposes that we would like to use it. I also quite frequently observe bicycling happening down the center of the road, and it would concern me that many of those people using that road to bicycle would continue to use, because that's where it's packed. It's where, there's a crowd in the road. People are not running on one side or the other side. So there are particular reasons why each individual chooses what part of that 20, between 19 to 20, because you can put a 4-foot piece in there, what part of the road you are choosing.
May I comment?
Thank you for the comments. Sorry, who was that?
Via Zoom, may I just add a quick comment?
Sure.
This is Elizabeth Harries, and I live on Raceway Road, and I wrote you a letter about 2 months ago after the meeting at the library, and I just want to say that I'm adding my concerns, and what I expressed in the letter hasn't changed. I think we're creating a potentially unsafe situation. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you for your comment. Other public to be heard?
Somebody else on Zoom has their hand up.
Colleen?
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Colleen Conti. I also live off of Raceway Road. I'm concerned about what the Bollards are going to do to the intersection by the market and Raceway Road, trying to get on and off of Route 15 or in and out of the market. I don't think there's been enough study as to whether or not you're going to be able to make a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn safely if there's a car coming up, or if you're up from the other side, making a left-hand turn if you're going to, wherever they end up putting the bollards. I don't think there's been enough research into that, or at least watching the traffic to see what's going on. And I also don't think there's been enough study about liability issues as well with these bollards. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Other public to be heard? Okay, our first item. Oh, a little slow on the draw there, Amy. You almost lost me. Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry about that. My computer was being a little goofy. I fully agree with all of the comments that have been made. I did want to bring a couple things up as I've thought about it. Generally speaking, when you're walking on the road, you're supposed to be walking so that you can face traffic and see who's coming at you, that kind of thing. And by directing people to this supposed protected, safe path that they're supposed to be walking in. And again, we found out at the library meeting that bikes aren't supposed to be in there. So the other lane is going to be shared between bikes and cars. So this lane is just for people walking, but at some point, depending on which direction you're going to have your back to traffic. And that seems to be extremely unsafe to me. Extremely. So that's concerning for sure. But yeah, I agree with everybody else that has said that it seems like this is going to make for a very dangerous situation, as well as a lot of liability on the town's part for anybody that gets injured, either a pedestrian, someone driving, hitting a bollard because it's dark out and they didn't see it. I don't know, getting forced off the road by another car when the road lanes are so narrow. I think it's going to create a very dangerous situation. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Pretty quick.
Yeah, my commute has changed recently, and now I go up the hill, Lee River into Jericho Center, where the new sidewalk was put in a couple of years ago, as you're going up the hill on the left-hand side. And it has blown my mind how many people I have seen running on the road, biking on the road, strollering on the road, et cetera, in all kinds of weather with all kinds of washed out roadsides. And they're not even using the sidewalk. So that was a huge chunk of money that we put in as townspeople, as would be this particular project, different flavor of it. But I just wanted to share what my observations in the new path is, that how many people are going to use it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that was the public to be heard section. So I'm going to ask that we let the agenda items roll forward, except for the ones that I've mentioned that where we will be looking for and asking for comment on.
Which one, which one you made note of?
The slower, safer streets for burning and the CCRPC land map.
Is everybody signed in too?
I saw the thing going around. Well, I don't know, if someone just walked in, maybe
Yeah.
missed it, but
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
you're welcome. First item on the agenda is the Jericho Bike and Pedestrian Connectivity Committee presents the AARP grant to study the pedestrian walkway on Raceway Road. Come on up, gentlemen.
Well, I think you all know me, but I'm the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Connectivity Committee. Thank you for making time on a busy day. We'll do our best to be concise and answer all your questions. Brief introduction of the project that we're proposing is a 4-week initial phase so that we ensure we do it for long enough to get a result and get people used to it, give people time to learn to use it, and have opinions and feedback. The goal of this is to have a temporary pop-up infrastructure that people can try and use, and we can gather feedback on road speeds and traffic volumes. And we believe that it will lower travel speeds and make the road safer by lowering the speed, but also creating a visually separated area for pedestrians to use the road. With me is Jack Evans, who's with Local Motion. He is a professional in this space, so I'll let him speak to a lot of the details. But the main point is this is a learning opportunity, and we're asking for select board permission to accept the grant from AARP and perform the temporary infrastructure. I will add one thing before we get started. During this, we heard a lot of comments from a lot of people who live on the road. And the two overarching ones that I think the select board should be aware of, regardless of this project, is that people are unhappy with the road surface, whether it be how much it's been raised, the amount of potholes, that sort of thing. And then people are also very unhappy with the speeds people travel on the road. So 2 things that we promised we would,
Fixing
speak
the
to.
potholes will increase the speed.
Yeah.
So you can only have one. You only get one.
I mean, I think it gets off topic, but there are ways to address both. And none of them are easy, none of them are free, but they are complaints that the residents have that, I think would make residents happier. So I'll pass it off to Jack, and then I can fill in any questions in between.
Yeah, and so regardless of the vote tonight, we have the data and we can make a report on sentiment towards Raceway across all. forget how many respondents we had, but it ended up being quite a few.
And that's local motion that has that data, or you both have it?
It's shared with the committee. I'm not gonna go through the whole.
I can send it to you or he can send it to you, but
Was that
we
from
can,
the
we can get
library?
it to you.
No, this is,
Survey.
we
Survey.
sent out flyers to each resident on Raceway
Oh,
and did a few different channels to share the survey. So we presented,
But you don't have anything from the library, then, you know, or is that just same kind
We
of stuff that
have-
you've been hearing?
yeah, so we have, the original format for the library meeting was supposed to be a overview presentation and then a small group dialogue in which the various committee members that came to volunteer that day would lead 4 to 8 people in conversation and take notes. It ended up being more of a half presentation, half Q&A, during which, so kind of like rapidly adapt to the changing situation, Jessica and another member of the committee made notes, but because the format was interrupted in the meeting, we weren't fully prepared to make formal minutes, but we can go back through the notes that we did take, the 2 different versions of notes, compare them, and through a committee.
Generally, the concerns and comments were similar to what we've heard here, and they came very fast, so I can't type that fast. And I don't know if anyone can, but our goal is to also present you with all the facts we've heard, as well as the facts that we've measured and things we know, so that you guys can make an educated decision, and we can answer any questions you have as well.
So if you would like to have me do a little blurb, or you just ask questions outright?
I think better with a little blurb.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just for the quick facts, the committee is asking the select board to accept $3,500 from AARP via their community challenge grant. This would be to purchase and temporarily install delineator posts along the south shoulder of Raceway Road. The aim here is to not just provide pedestrians with dedicated space, but to calm traffic overall by visually narrowing the road. And so the goal is to test basically a design speed for the road that is lower than it is, to make it feel safer for users of all modes, ages, and abilities. I know that Raceway has many people who walk their dogs on it, many people who do it just for recreation, a lot of bikers, especially gravel bikers. One of the things that we found in talking, and even today, along the road, we ran into a father with 2 children who asked when the bollards were going in. There's a concern about who isn't using the road right now, and why that might be. We've heard, I believe it was at the March 10th committee meeting, following the first select board meeting, that a mother wanted to see this project go forward because she wanted, by the time her child was in middle school, to feel safe letting her child walk to middle school. And that just kind of raises a concern that for people on the lower end and the upper end of the age spectrum, there's a certain avoidance, like we heard tonight when talking about commute times and how people avoid walking when there are garbage trucks or there is commuting going on. We think that this road should be able to be used by the people who live there, no matter the time, not just for people driving to and from work.
I'll add that, you know, if you look at the laws and the way roads are designed and the way travel laws are written, pedestrians, bicycles, horses, and cars all have an equal right to be on the road at any time of the day. So it is not, it's not right to say that pedestrians shouldn't use it between these hours. Now, you as a pedestrian have a duty for your own safety, but we have to design and construct roads for all users at all times.
And just a couple more facts for the concerns that we've heard the most of. we heard about the highway department. We've also heard about the fire department at the library meeting. We've reached out to both of them. There's been a bit of email tag. And so we haven't gotten the full letter of support or letter of no complaint from them, but we've spoken to them and heard their support for the project, provided it does not interrupt traffic during an emergency, which, yes, when a fire truck, which is an oversized truck, one of the largest vehicles that would use this road, and by Vermont law requires 14-foot clearance on any road surface, which is not their full width, it's over their full width. Cars that are going eastbound towards Jericho Market would have to pull over, likely to allow the fire truck to move through. And that is something that legally cars would have to do now, so there's not much change. And with the highway department, they've expressed concern that they might not be able to give as adequate notice for the volunteers to go out and remove the posts as they would like, but
The fire department's not paying it, the road crew.
the highway department,
The road crew.
yeah, road crew. But that they would like for to be able to provide that notice, and that the volunteers are able to do that. Regarding road width, we just went out and measured it today. I just walked down the 1/3 mile. We found no location below 21 feet, and most locations are above 22 feet. Our design would be to have a 4-foot pedestrian area, which is inclusive of the bollard. So the rubber base would not be extending into or beyond the 4 feet, which gives, in almost every single situation, 18 feet of travel lane, which is 9-foot lanes, which is a standard small lane. In the areas that are below 22 feet, we are totally fine with just not doing bollards. 100 feet, a couple 100 feet maybe for that stretch. And it is already,
Repeat that again.
there are, for the area that is below 22 feet in road width,
It's 21 feet.
yeah, it's 21 feet. And we would be perfectly fine with not having bollards for that stretch. It'd just be a longer spacing of the bollards that are already spaced out. And it's already kind of traffic calmed with hedges and bushes on either side.
And additionally, we would not put bollards in front of driveways, obviously, mailboxes. We would not put them near the intersection of Route 15. People need to be able to take the curves. So just addressing that.
And then there's two sort of options. We're coming to you with a proposal that's likely to change if it is passed at all tonight. We said 4 weeks earlier. We can go down to 3 weeks. Below that, we start to not be able to get data collection that really works.
Yeah, to be fair, I did been a little concerned about this one for a good week or so. So I spoke with both these gentlemen, and one thing that I talked about is, could we do it so that the first phase of the project would end before the school buses are running? So if it didn't start till, like, I think the plan was early August, so if we did it like a 3-week thing and had it end before whatever the first day of school is, and so I was hoping that might make it more palatable for some of the folks that are concerned.
One additional potential, I can't make promises here because when you apply for the AARP grant, you have to do a line item. And all of our line item was for the bollards. They want to see this project happen, and so they might be willing to accommodate moving some of the money that we put towards bollards towards the highway or road crew, and ensuring that the town isn't paying for extra time if the road crew does have to move the bollards for 10 or 15 minutes when they're grading. So if that alleviates any concerns about that issue.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna pass tonight either. I think if it were to pass, one of the conditions would be, we think we could provide 24-hour notice to like an email list. And because we don't want them getting out of the vehicle to do it. But I think 24-hour notices should be plenty. I mean, I guess it, yeah.
We should have. Take it.
Yeah, I asked Paula and she answered for him unfortunately, so he's already answered whether he likes it or not. Anyway,
Yeah, so 24 hours.
Yeah, they just can't, they can't be responsible for getting out of the vehicle and putting up the bollards or moving them. But I think we could certainly do the 24 hours if it passed.
So then the bottom line here is this committee has worked for the past few months to bring forward a grant, a small grant, only $3,500, but with no local match from the town. And that comes with the opportunity to just try something, an experiment on a road that has for years now been contentious and had concerns both about speeding and road quality. And from residents, we've heard concerns about safety during certain times of the day or for certain users using that road. This is an opportunity to try something for 3 weeks, and then after that, have a supply of these bollards that you are then able to kind of apply to any other situation and test the same thing throughout the town of Jericho.
Whether it be construction or another road where, you know, you'd like the same information studied. Is that good? All right. Do you guys have any questions for us, concerns we can answer?
Well, you know, how many volunteers do you think is gonna be able to take care of this over even a 3-week period? Because, you know, even with 24 hours, it might be, you know, people might burn out or what happens if a volunteer gets hurt?
Not even moving every day. It's not, I mean, it's gonna be.
I mean,
No, but what if, you know, somebody gets hurt moving and like, you know, strains their muscle, if it pulls her back, I mean, you know, are they willing to take the liability?
I mean, imagine grading happens once a month on average for a road, maybe 2 times a month, even if it's 3 times a month,
I
once
think
a
we should
week.
ask
Yeah.
our road foreman how frequently he needs to grade Raceway.
I mean, it all depends on the weather. So if we get a significant amount of rain, it could be up to 2-3 times a month.
Okay, so we have 7 committee members plus several other residents in town who've expressed interest in helping move these on short notice. They weigh 19 pounds, which for most people is a bag of groceries. If it's a quarter mile, I believe that's around 1,200 feet. If we're placing a bollard every 50 to 100 feet, that's 15 to 20 bollards to move. Basically to move off the surface for however long it takes to grade and move back. I mean, if I'm in town, I don't see that being an issue. One of our community members lives on the road, so she can put them in her driveway or whatever, so. That's our plan, if you find it acceptable.
I just worry about, you know, because what if it varies when they put it back from what it was? I mean, it might change the space in the width of the
I
road.
did wonder about that. In my discussions, I thought of that one after, like, how do they know exactly where to put them back? I assume they're gonna be placed strategically with, you know, your expertise from you and your community, but.
But then how do you get it back?
Or is it gonna be pretty like?
It's a yardstick plus a foot, so,
Yeah.
I can probably provide the heavy duty, contractors like measuring tape. But if we're keeping it to 4 feet and we know where not to place them, which is that stretch where it's below 22 feet. As long as the volunteers know to avoid the driveways, the mailboxes, the hydrants, whatever. A little variation, I think, won't lead to catastrophe.
Yeah, I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this and the thought, you know, because everybody does want, you know, to feel like they can walk and stuff.
Do they though?
But clearly, you know, the key is, as you said, the road is an issue and, you know, whether, you know, what's your end game, because this can't be made permanent until something happens to the road for real. You know, whether it's, you know, it being built from the base up, because, you know, even with a gravel road, you know, if you really go back in and rebuild it, then you can just, it's a better better gravel road, like what's happened with Stone Hollow for a very long time, because it was the base was filled up, so it could be paved if it was going to be paved, but it didn't have to be paved. Same way, and that's a long-term process even for Raceway. So this could be made permanent because, you know, I can't see you doing an entire summer or something like this, because the road crew just, and your volunteers would burn out. Plus, you'd have to take it away for the winter, because how do you grade, you know, something, a road even with, you know, these permanent structures in place. But I did have an idea that because of the work you've done and the really very nice letter written by Jerry Hill, that other people have talked about it at the last meeting. Why not focus on working on the Jerry Hill issue, you know, because somebody had said that the sidewalk there is a little overgrown, and there's some issues with that sidewalk. And then have a walkway for them, you know, try the structure for them to walk to the market, because that's what they've talked about. That's where they walk. And, you know, number 2 in your grant talks about, you know, the focus is on people 50 and up, although it does, you know, pertain to all residents, but AARP's community challenge grants, which I've seen before, really do focus on people around 50. And, you know, that could, you know, kind of get this off the ground without affecting, you know, making so many other people cranky.
Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but your second concern is that unfortunately the way we've written the grant, we can't go back and change it at this point. It's been awarded on a certain project design. And so that's, while it's a great idea, it has to be a separate conversation and something we could work on.
But he already said that they've talked about maybe they could do something different, but, you know, whether they'd be willing to do this much, because it does still do a 50 and over, you know, it really helps that community much more. And you're still using the bollards for a certain segment of the road.
I think the main concern there is, well, for one, the rehabilitation of that side path is going to be probably much more than 3,500. When we just walked the road today, you can kind of see patches of the asphalt, but most of it is grass. Most of it is gravel and like weird rocks covering up damaged asphalt that is cracked and uneven. So not much safer. To your first point about what is the end result of this? Because obviously this isn't going to be a wintertime solution. This isn't going to be something that works for an entire summer.
I can speak to this as well.
Yeah, for me, it's a stepping stone and a piece of justification for future grant opportunities. You have already discussed an alternative of bike and ped connections on Raceway Road. One common next step from that sort of from that phase in the process is to do a pilot or a demonstration project showing something for bike and ped connections on that road. In the future, with this data, with this being under the town of Jericho's belt, maybe even next year, applying to something like the AARP grant again, and saying we know that a pedestrian pathway is able to improve safety for people who are walking and rolling or whatever, who are over 50 and of all ages. So let's ask for $30,000 and fully rehab this path or this part of the sidewalk. If we just went and asked outright for that money, we wouldn't be able to be sitting here asking to accept the funds, because there simply wouldn't be kind of the foundation of evidence showing that that would help, because you know, there is no earlier process. This is the first step in that process.
So we're an advisory committee, which means we can only advise you guys on what we think should happen or could happen. The end goal of this project is to ideally do the study, collect traffic data before, during, and after, showing speeds, traffic volumes, etc. Once we complete the study, we can present you with the data and say, look, nothing changed. Doing this, finding some way to do this permanently wouldn't change anything on the road. Or we find out, hey, people drove slower, it was safer. People reported in the surveys that they walked on it more often. And at that point, I'm not gonna get into hypotheticals of avenues the select board could choose to take. But that would show you that implementing a protected travel lane for pedestrians and narrowing the road width makes the road slower and safer. And that is our goal, is to make a recommendation of saying, implementing infrastructure and design here on this road can make it safer. What the select board does with that is not really hard to say. We can give advice, but we can't dictate anything.
Well, I hate to be, too negative sounding all the time. But, because data is good. I like data. I
And
live,
trying something is good as opposed to just, let's have another study done
Right.
and talk about it.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, the key is, we have not, even though we've approved, the sidewalk alternative. The focus we have voted on was to focus on Griswold to Packard. And maybe in the end, Raceway's not even on the list because, the idea is that it may, go up the other side. We've, thought about that.
Is there someone who could get some data about whether Raceway is a good path to use for this? Oh, I know, I could do. You could have some ballers on Raceway,
Yeah.
just for 3 weeks and see how that works.
But
That would be some good data.
Yeah, it'd be great data, but at the same time, it's Raceway needs the
Need a
road
ton of
work.
things.
And
I don't know where to begin. Oh, I know how we could begin.
You need to reclaim the
We could
road.
get some ballers.
No, you need the road work. I mean, that's really the issue. If we're gonna get a grant, and right now, the funding is really tenuous.
But
For
they have,
grants for
they have
sidewalks.
grants. They have a grant.
They have a grant for the small thing. I'm talking, the sidewalk grant that we're talking about. Because that would, Griswold to Packard is the first iteration to get, that gets the most people that we voted on for sidewalks. Raceway was very secondary to the process. And that could be 5-10 years down the road. I mean, that data is not going to be valid in 10 years or even 5 years. Because it's 3 to 5 years to build a sidewalk. It's assuming that funding is going to be there for sidewalks for state Vermont.
The data wouldn't be valid in terms of current usage, but the data would show that this road, the way it exists, performing these activities has this result on traffic. Traffic volumes might change and user groups might change, but the structure of the road and the effect that the infrastructure has would remain the same unless you reconstructed the road in the meantime.
Which really is what, is a long term, it's one of the things that needs to be done.
That's the comment we heard from people.
And if I may, connecting one of the town centers to one of the other town centers is a fantastic 10-year goal or 20-year goal or however long that takes. But right now we have a neighborhood that is a 1/3 mile away from a village center, which has the opportunity to try infrastructure that will improve safety for accessing the various destinations there, the school, the library, the market, churches, post offices, banks, and could serve as a stepping stone for not a sidewalk grant for building a new sidewalk, but for rehabbing an existing sidewalk and improving it to be more resistant to the drainage issues and sort of like grading issues that currently have.
Peter, did you have any questions?
No questions, I have comments, and I just want to say, sort of, here's where I'm coming at this from. This cost the town $0. It's been now taken from a 4-week test down to a 3-week test. So we've got a lot of people here who are really upset about a 3-week test on a dirt road to try something to make the road safer for pedestrians. People have said, I don't walk on this road during these times because cars go too fast. This will slow down cars. The fact that people's biking and walking is accommodating cars on a dirt road is completely backwards to me. One of the concerns is this is going to make travel slower on the road because we'll have to accommodate having a more narrow road. People are both saying, we want people to slow down and we want nothing to be done to make that happen. I am really, really frustrated. When I ran for election a year ago and I stood out in the rain in front of town, in front of the school for the meeting, many people said to me, we have to make the town more connected through ways besides automobiles. And as soon as, the smallest thing, a third of a mile on one dirt road that is not a main drag anywhere, as soon as that happens, everyone is up in arms about how this is going to make this road less safe, which I believe, and this is my opinion, is ludicrous. I live at the end of Raceway Road on Route 15. I have walked and biked and ran up that road for the last 30 years. My kids want to ride their bikes on that road. I bet I can literally count on both hands the number of times I have been on the road and at the same time had two cars passing me at the exact same moment. And even that isn't a problem unless it's me and the bollard and two cars all at the exact same spot. Because for 50 feet behind me and 50 feet in front of me, there's plenty of room for a car to pull into the walking lane and then pull back into the road. And I'm getting emotional and I'm upset because it just feels like we like our town the way it is. And anybody who wants something different, sorry, why don't you go to Essex?
How do you really feel?
I'm embarrassed, honestly. I'm embarrassed that these gentlemen are sitting here and having to listen to this, being perfectly honest.
I mean, that was the same discussion about the sidewalk and using Raceway, because most people felt that Raceway wasn't, a connector, that when we were talking about sidewalks at that point too. It's a difficult situation. And
For 3 weeks. It's a difficult situation for 3 weeks.
Theoretical.
yeah, I mean, we certainly need to have volunteers sign a volunteer service agreement, release the town from liability, that's for sure.
We can throw up 1,000
Yeah.
minor reasons why this won't work.
No, I'm just
You
saying.
have,
that
and
we
Cody
need to-
and
we
Jeff
gotta
have an
make sure
answer.
the town is
Peter,
stuff.
let her speak, please.
We need to make sure that the town is not responsible for something that might happen, make sure that the liability covers it, even the town hall art had a liability thing in there. So, I mean, we need to do the same thing. So that, because
Catherine, the parliamentarian. Come in heavy with the paperwork.
Yep.
Understood.
I mean, that's a thing to consider. Anyway.
Come on in, folks. This is as good as it gets. Come on in. Yeah.
I'd stay out there too.
Yeah.
Should have done this at the auditorium again.
Well, library.
I just make sure people, are safe with anybody else.
So, yeah, in terms of volunteers, pop-up projects are something that local motion does. Would like to do it more, but we do it all the time. And we have a pretty thorough process for not only giving people the safety material that they need, but also sort of like liability waivers and legal protection that local motion or the town. We'd be able
But
to,
you need to be protected too.
yeah.
I'm going to get all these answers out there in the public, it's
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
in the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, dinner. Hit the recording.
Yes, so
What do you want to do?
We gotta rip the Band-Aid off.
I would make a motion to approve the requested, I'm not sure what the language is, the request to establish the 3-week temporary bollard setup on the first third of a mile of Raceway, starting at a time that is agreed upon later.
So we're requesting permission to perform to accept the grant,
Accept the
and if we
grant.
accept the grant, we must perform the project.
Okay, so then that's easy then. I make a motion to, allow the town of Jericho to accept the grant from, AARP.
AARP.
I'll second the motion anyway. That way it's seconded.
So the motion has been made and there is a second. I had a really good thing written out, and Peter made it seem not even half well written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm not gonna answer yet.
All opposed?
I'm still not sure either. Cause I just worry about people. I mean, when so many people who are AARP eligible are upset about it, and AARP is talking about, wanting positive, and I read that one, well, that doesn't sound good considering what people are saying, that, ARP wanted positive, wanted to be advertised and it's their thing. And here you've got people who are AARP certified really fussing against it. I mean, what is that, how does that impact, what they want to do in the future? Because I think it's a great idea to go ahead and in the future, do something for the Jerry Hill area. I think that's a really important one to consider. So I
read notes from the library meeting of the bicycle ped committee, and I was not there, and it's just from notes that I read. It sounded like there was a plan to have a way for people with all points of view to be able to voice those points of view by breaking into small groups, and that it sounds like the situation was basically shut down by loud people who said, we want to have a group conversation so everyone can be heard, and then many people did not talk. And
that's true.
And I believe that we have a very loud group, and I don't know if they're majority or minority, but I believe there are people who are not willing to speak up.
We are trying to be safe. And that's the key. Everybody, people on the road, I mean, it's the bicycles that are still going to be with the cars as opposed to the motors. And that is-
Bicycles have a right to that lane of travel, and cars are legally obligated to only pass when it's safe. So the car can wait till the end of the quarter mile. But the bicycle can then move over and free up the lane.
That is good, because
Is-
I know that was part of the issue when we were talking about how you would do some things where share the lane on Raceway for the bicycles, that, that there was ways of dealing with that.
Was it expected that the bikes would be? What side of the bollards are they?
They're traveling with the cars, because this is not bicycle infrastructure.
A child on a balance bike, totally fine to use inside the bollard. It really is just what is safest, and we've heard that like the middle of the road is more compacted and probably easier to use for people. Of the majority user group biking on that road.
I'm not being sarcastic with the question, but if a biker was in the middle of the road and cars were coming up, that biker, if I were biking on the road in the middle of the road and two cars came up, I could pull into the walkable area to let the cars pass and then pull back out.
I mean, you would, or you wouldn't be here.
Right, exactly.
Unless you're my size with a can of paint.
So I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why I'm voting no. I'm voting no because I have literally been thinking about this, not sure how I was going to vote until I got here, until just now. I can list 1,000 reasons for yes and 1,000 reasons for no. My main reason for no is that I do feel that the most advantage to this project would be to the people at Valley's Edge and to the people of Jerry Hill. And that is where we've heard the most opposition. And this solidified when I was talking with a gentleman last night about a different subject on the agenda. And he was pointing out that, a lot of people are weighing in on this particular thing. They're not people that are affected by it. They're not people that live in this particular area of town. They're not in this particular area. So we do need to listen to them, of course, but they're not quite as impacted as we are. That's the reason for my no vote. Peter said it very well. I share all of his frustrations. I'm gonna read what I said, just so you don't think I'm just copying him, but I'm very frustrated that even an experiment using temporary measures is causing this much blowback. That the town gets accused of being too slow, doing nothing, but everything that we try to do meets such immense opposing force to our volunteers that it becomes easier to do nothing. The fact that I'm voting no means that we are unlikely to get help from local motion in the future. We're gonna need their help. It means that we're unlikely.
To do the other thing.
It means that we're unlikely to be selected for any future AARP grants to make our town more accessible for seniors. And it makes the status quo be to do nothing. And I was thinking about this comment on the way up of there's one gentleman who shows up fairly regularly and is one that is actually voices repeated opposition to doing nothing. I'm going to call him out by name, and it's Chuck. And it actually made me, appreciate some of those comments a little more, because it is very easy to do absolutely nothing. And that's what we're going to do, because I think this is going to add way too much drama for our staff, for these meetings. We're going to have this group here every meeting during which these bollards are up. And I'm voting no, because it's not gonna provide us enough value for the amount of angst and vitriol that we're hearing, and I'm really disappointed to be voting no. Next agenda item, please.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for all your work and effort.
Yeah.
Of course.
I was hoping the Jerry Hill thing would work. I really
Yeah.
was, because that sort of felt, so it kind of was a nice compromise between the vitriol we were hearing and doing something positive to help the group.
I think that was a more feasible project, but gets into the construction realm, which we're not.
Yeah, I was just hoping
Yeah.
they could just do the bollard part and move it to the town, and they'll start cleaning up the rest. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's definitely something we can look into in the future.
Thank you for your, thank you for
All
your.
right, have a good trip, Cody.
Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is CCRPC presents the future land use map review and considers approval of tier 1B status.
You see that, Eric, on the regular?
Oh. Nope, we're seeing your,
Yeah.
Don't need to?
Just go to the.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Perfect.
we're not seeing, so you gotta go to the. Go back to your share.
Better. Thank you.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening. So I'm Chris Shaheen, Town Planner. I am here with Darren Scribner, who is with CCRPC. We're here to talk about primarily the primary action from the select board tonight is requesting tier 1B status through our CCRPC. We'll explain what that means. Also to go over what The future land use map is for Chittenden County for the region and housing targets. This is primarily a CCRPC initiative. The Planning Commission and myself and a working group from the Planning Commission has been working closely with them as they've developed their future land use map. You can go on to the next slide. Tonight, we want to go have a couple things. One is just to make sure there's a general understanding of the future land use map, which applies to all 19 municipalities within Chittenden County, but then specifically how it applies to Jericho. We're going to talk about this Tier 1B designation, what that means, the housing targets, the future land use map designation specifically for Jericho, and what they mean for the town, and then hopefully have a formal action from the select board on the recommendations from the Planning Commission, and I'll walk through what those are. So this is the second time that CCRPC has come, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission has come before the select board to discuss the future land use map and the process that we're going through right now. The first one, I think, was in September 2024, so like right before I got here. So since then, myself and the Planning Commission and the working group, like I said, we've been working with them to discuss all of these things. The Planning Commission has provided feedback on the draft future land use maps that we're going to talk about, and CCRPC did make some initial changes to the draft before it was released to the public. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren because he is going to walk through what CCRPC has been doing for the last couple of months.
Thanks, Chris, and good to see you all, and good to be here. Thanks for having us. Chris covered a lot of things to start off, so what I want to do is, as we go to the next slide, take a step back and just look at the big picture of what this initiative is all about. So Act 181 was passed a year ago, and it tried to make some changes to how our land use regulation and policies are done in the state of Vermont, with the goal of trying to align state, regional, and local efforts to address the housing crisis, but also to ensure protection for our valued rural areas and natural resource areas. So we're trying to do a lot at once, as usual. And the thing to remember, that the slide doesn't really communicate that well, but we've been doing this for a long time. Jericho's been doing something for a long time. And even though it feels like a big change in some ways, in other ways, it's really continuing a lot of the work we've already done. Overall, that map that Chris talked about is not going to change that much from what we have today, which you can see at least for Jericho. This shows a mostly rural town with a couple of village areas in yellow. The green is rural, the villages are yellow. And that reflects where your existing settlements have been, where you've already grown historically, where you are likely to continue to want to concentrate growth in line with both your own local work and local plans, as well as our regional and statewide goals. So that's really what we're here to figure out, and how to get a few of the different elements of how growth and development and land use work to grow in the same direction. So there's our actual regional plan and local plan policies that say where we do and don't want development and kind of what that looks like. We're trying to align those with the state's designation programs that provide incentives for growth that we want to see happen. And we're also trying to align that with Act 250, which regulates how rate development happens when it has a regional or statewide impact. We want all of these to be talking the same language. We want to be talking the same language across the state and across our region so that we can talk apples to apples. So on the next slide,
I can just say real quick, the image that's on the right now, that's just the green and the yellow for Jericho. That is what the current future land use map is that's on the books. You can see there's only two colors for Jericho. The new designations that Darren's going to start talking about now, there are many more designations that are being applied to Jericho based on guidance that we're getting from the state. So this is where we've been in the past. So it's just giving you some context for, before it was really simple, green and yellow, and now we've got a lot more colors we need to apply to the map.
Yeah, and I'll take that one to emphasize
the current future map that gets a little confusing.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's changing for CCRPC specifically is historically our regional map is based directly on local zoning. In fact, not even the plan, but hopefully that's consistent with your zoning. So it's really been things as they are. Now we're being able to take a step further and say, where would we like things to be, with regional planning having a little more influence over how some of those incentives and regulations can come into play. So this is the new system that we're going to be using across the state. There's a bunch of different categories that will show up in every region and in many municipalities. The ones that are important to Jericho are in red boxes. The ones in the X's you may see in other towns that are important for the regional context, but are not showing up on your local map because they're just not quite applicable to you because of those state criteria that are in our 181. So what we wanted to focus on is you've got a village center, you've got several village centers and several village areas surrounding those. Those are those same areas of yellow you saw before, with a little bit of modification based on some of the work that Jericho has done and some of the possibilities that exist for how those can bring advance Jericho's goals, as well as our regional state goals. We saw a lot of the light green in the last map in that borough category. That's all pretty much staying the same, but as Chris said, we've got a few new categories to be able to get more specific and align a little better with Jericho's mapping, although we do have to follow some state criteria. We're not going to focus on those tonight, although we're happy to answer questions if you have them. You do also have this optional transition area. These are places where we know some local planning is taking place. We know that there's some potential change happening between one category or another, and there's a lot of opportunity, but we're not exactly sure or can't say for certain exactly which of those other categories it can fall into in terms of village area, planned growth area, village center, etc. So it's a little bit of a pay attention here, good things are happening, and someday we hope to be able to move those transition areas into one of those other categories. The next line of this image here shows how that aligns with the Community Investment Program, formerly the State Designation Program. That's getting simplified and streamlined into just a center and a neighborhood designation. There's no longer going to be 8 different types of designations. And the other great news is that you don't have to renew those designations with the state directly anymore. It's done through CCRPC's regional plan approval. So it aligns directly with the land use category and automatically enables those areas to access benefits like historic preservation tax credits, state infrastructure investment studies, and also planning studies, ability to change some things about your speed limits in these areas. And there are a few other benefits I'm happy to walk through. They're very similar to the existing state designation program. The last thing, and this is what we really want to talk about tonight, and of course the graphics here are kind of blocking it out. That last line that says, it's supposed to say Tier 1B, partial exemption. This is what Act 250 is going to, how Act 250 is going to change a little bit in line with these state or with these regional plan areas. Currently, there is a threshold of any project that is over 10 acres or with 10 or more units in that project is subject to Act 250, the state level development review process. And the idea is that in areas where we plan for growth and where the community, the municipality has planned for growth and said, we want to have development here that is concentrated and is compact in line with our state goals. We don't need that additional state level review of regional and state impacts. We've already kind of addressed that through the planning process. So Wackening 1 allows a town to say, we've got this area covered. We don't need additional review when it comes to projects that are between 10 units and 50 units or on 10 acres or less. So it's a very narrow exemption, and it's really trying to get at infill housing in places that are already primed for it, that aren't going to create significant impacts because of the planning work that towns have done. Any project that is more than 10 acres or more than 50 units will still go through Act 250. So Chris mentioned that the sawmill project, regardless of this Tier 1B exemption, would still have Act 250 review, but it's allowing those missing middle housing projects to happen where they otherwise may not, or would have higher costs and more time in the Act 250 permitting process. We're trying to really enable that housing to happen where it makes sense.
But what if, so this is where I'm not a zoning expert, as most people can attest. What if the owner were to sell 9.9 acres worth of lots to me,
Mhm.
and I were to put up 49 units.
Mhm.
And then he also sells the same amount to Catherine, who's gonna put up 49 units. Do neither of us need Act 250 then, because we're tier 1B?
There is a provision in the Act 250 thresholds that say any person who is doing multiple projects has to you have to consider all those projects in aggregate in terms of determining that threshold. So
But
maybe
he's
if they
just selling
sold
me the lot.
it.
He's just selling me the lot. I buy the lot or lots or whatever, and so can we do it or not?
I would have to defer to the.
So there's gotta be some level of review
Right.
that still happens
Yeah.
in this tier 1B.
Yeah, I'd have to defer
Because
that
that's a pretty
question to.
tricky way of getting around it.
There's always been ways.
But that's what happens all the time, right?
Yeah,
Like.
exactly.
you split up
And
your-
it's actually a really important point to make because that's part of why Act 81 was enacted. It was recognizing that that current threshold that's been in place for almost 50 years of 10 units on 10 acres has resulted in a lot of 9-acre subdivisions throughout the
Yes,
state.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because of that threshold. So this is
Yeah.
trying to say, look, in these very specific areas where we know development's gonna happen anyway, because we've encouraged it to happen. We're gonna try to concentrate that there, and we're gonna say, there's still things, that's where we're gonna sort of limit the potential for things like that to happen. Outside of those village centers and village areas, for instance, in the transition and the rural districts, the same Act 250 thresholds will apply. You're not eligible to ask for that exemption in those areas. The other thing to remember about any development project is that it still has to go through local regulations. So whatever your own regulations say about how you develop
Right.
are still in effect.
Yep.
It also will still have to get other applicable state permits. Wetlands, water and wastewater, stormwater, traffic, specifically access off a state highway if that is applicable. Anything, state fire marshal, building code permits, all of that will still be in effect even for a tier 1B exempt project. So it's not completely saying, yeah, anything goes. It's just saying that specific, somewhat duplicative review that Act 250 provides of saying, is this project going to have a statewide regional impact on these 9 criteria? Is that really necessary for an area that we've already determined that most of those criteria won't apply or will be addressed by local regulations?
I never asked this question at the RPC meetings because it's so specific. But our area that really has the most potential for a lot of growth right now has water, but it doesn't have wastewater. We're working on wastewater.
Yep.
And tier 1B, you need to, is there a timeline that we actually have to get that wastewater functional in order to continue being a tier 1B or?
Not necessarily. So the great thing about tier 1B is that it was expanded to not just areas that have both water and wastewater, but also to smaller villages that may have one or the other or neither, as long as there's adequate soils for on-site disposal. So even small towns in the middle of nowhere, Vermont, can still have a village center in the village area with a tier 1B exemption.
Oh, good.
The criteria specific to that are just about aligning with this regional mapping. And as long as there's some level of infrastructure available or the capacity for soils, that qualifies. That's something that we will be documenting for the Land Use Review Board when we get our regional plan approved and have to make these requests and justify these areas. We're happy to work with all the municipalities who have requested tier 1B to put that case together for the Land Use Review Board.
Great.
Great. So I think I'm still talking about this one, right, Chris? We've
Sure,
got,
yep.
This is the map showing the regional future land use map. So CCRPC's new map for Jericho. And you'll see again, a lot of it's rural, similar to the last map. Those areas that were in yellow before are now a multitude of different colors, but the general outline of them is still the same. We have tried to expand a couple of spots where it aligns with Jericho's own newly adopted land use map. And we've tried to make sure that there's opportunities to include some of these areas that might benefit from both the state designation program, the community investment incentives, as well as this tier 1B exemption. The two big things to highlight are the transition areas, which Jericho's under working on right now that may move towards other areas, but then, we did, this map's a little out of date, and it might show up on the next slide. Jericho and, the planning commission have requested to expand the village area, the area in pink, to include an existing neighborhood off of Packard Road. We have done that on our next iteration of the map, and that might be on the next slide.
Yeah, so let me, so the planning commission reviewed the draft map, and what you see on the screen here is, the planning commission recommended that the area that's shown in red be added as a village area. We also gave some feedback to CCRPC about the areas that are shown in yellow, that we thought that they should be a different rural category. Now, when you go to the next slide, CCRPC took some of that information and literally made the change of it on the map, and then they took some of that information and it informed what they were doing for other throughout the county. So they literally took the change that we requested for the village designation. They did not take the literal designation, recommendation for the rural areas, but it did inform what they were doing when they look at the whole county.
And the reason we didn't do exactly what Jericho asked for is because we do have some state criteria that we have to follow when we do these maps, and our own consistency across the region, but we were able to make a couple of changes that were consistent with those rural areas. But we're here tonight to talk about, Tier 1B. So just to reframe that in terms of this map, the dark pink, the magenta, and the lighter pink are the areas that are eligible for this Tier 1B exemption. So the question before you tonight is just specific to those areas. Should they have this exemption from Act 250? I'll also mention that it's specific to housing development for Tier 1B. It does not affect commercial development, so we're only talking about housing projects. There is an optional Tier 1A designation the town theoretically could pursue, although you might not qualify now, that would cover all types of development, but that might be something to consider in the future. The transition areas are not eligible, and all the rural areas and their sub areas are not eligible.
So just to follow up on that, my understanding is we do not qualify for Tier 1A because I believe to qualify that you have to have both municipal water and municipal sewer, and we only have municipal water. It would also require a level of staff capacity to take over a lot of review of regulations that we just don't have the capacity here at town.
So I'm sorry, Tier 1A is the one that's includes businesses also? Is that the only difference?
It's a little, essentially, yes. Okay. It's the town saying that you have a level of regulation locally that meets or exceeds Act 250. It's not necessarily saying you have to administer Act 250 locally, but it's saying, you know, Burlington.
Our oversight is so comprehensive that it's.
It's Burlington, South Burlington. It's the larger cities that have.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Other thing I'll mention while we're here is that those pink and magenta areas are the eligible areas. You do not necessarily have to opt into all of those areas. You can pick and choose from within them based on any local priorities you have. But the planning commission's recommendation was to opt into all eligible areas. We'll just go to the next slide real quick. This is reiterating what Chris mentioned before, and what I've mentioned about we're trying to align local map and the regional map as much as we can within our statutory limits. And Jericho's map actually looked pretty good when it came out in terms of what this regional map was going to look like. It got pretty close. So let's move on to the next slide. And we've kind of covered a lot of this already, but happy to take any further questions. Just to reiterate, Tier 1A we just covered. Tier 1B is what we've been talking about. Tier 2 is pretty much everything else where the status quo remains. Act 250 will still apply as it always does. One thing that is not part of this conversation, but it is a state conversation, is Tier 3, where there will be expanded Act 250 jurisdictions specifically for critical natural resources. The Land Use Review Board is working through public outreach and developing a rule about that right now. It's not necessarily going to look exactly like our rural conservation dark green on the map, but we're hoping that it'll mostly align and overlap. You just might want to be interested in that in terms of how that might look for Jericho in terms of your natural resource protections. So, as I mentioned, Planning Commission recommended at its recent meeting to request that the Select Board request a CCRPC Tier 1B designation for all eligible areas, all 3 village centers and the village areas surrounding them. Just to talk about process for a second, the Select Board will make that request to CCRPC, and then we will take that to the Land Use Review Board when we get our regional map or our regional plan reviewed and confirmed the way we would confirm your local plan. It's all wrapped into one process at the state level now. And that will go into effect automatically as soon as our regional plan is adopted.
So we ask you and then you take our request and encompass it in the larger chicken pie request to the state, and then it all comes back through you to us.
Exactly. We batch it all up and it's all in one fell swoop. The same is true for your community investment program incentives. So the village center and neighborhood development area program that exists today is getting rolled into these village centers and village areas. Once our regional plan is approved, those benefits are there automatically. They will still be there in the interim too. And we won't have to get that renewed at the state level. We do that at the regional planning process. So a little less work for you. The last thing I should mention, which we didn't actually put on here, but there has been an interim Act 250 exemption in place since Act 181 was passed and until our regional plan is approved. That is very similar to Tier 1B. It is saying that in certain areas around your existing village centers as they were mapped before and a quarter mile around them, there's an exemption of up to 50 units on 10 acres or fewer for housing projects. So that's already been in place for the last year or so. Requesting Tier 1B of the Regional Planning Commission would essentially be extending that interim exemption that's already been here and that may have resulted in a little bit of housing in a couple of places. It will expand the geographic area of that interim exemption, which is a little more limited in Jericho currently because our regional map is more expansive than that.
That's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just think that.
And we try to do these meetings in like half hour, 45 minutes, but we never quite hit that done.
So it sounded really cool until you told us you already have it, basically.
And that will go away.
Right.
This slide just talks about. I know, I stole that thunder. This slide just talks about Jericho's housing target as allocated by CCRPC. We got a housing target from the state, and we have to break that out by municipality across the region. We had a process for doing that considered a lot of different factors, including development potential, existing plans, existing zoning capacity, historic development patterns in these communities. But the upshot is that we had 3 different categories. Jericho fell into the mixed urban and rural category, and it resulted in a housing target that was generally consistent with what the select board already approved as a housing goal a year and a half ago, a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And actually your goal was higher than what we've given to Jericho, so you're in great shape as far as that goes. I'm going to talk more about what housing targets mean in terms of your municipal plan and the actions associated with it, but Jericho's existing plan that you just have adopted is already doing a lot of great work in this, so no concerns there.
So are there any overall questions on the future land use map, the Tier 1B designation, and the housing targets before I get into specifically what the planning commission was recommendations on, which are not that complicated, but.
I don't have any questions. Maybe a summary for me to make sure I understand it right. The existing future map is pretty bland. There's only 2 colors. The new one that we're being asked to adopt has a lot more.
More colors.
So it's more detailed and it's more specific and drives more things. And then in addition to that, you also want us to consider asking you to allow us to be a Tier 1B in all those areas that are favored.
Sure.
Did I capture all that?
That's the only action you've taken as that Tier 1B, although we're happy to hear support for the map and the housing targets, or questions or lack of support. That's all very
And they can formally endorse both of them tonight if you up for it.
Sure.
Yeah, just some other things to make clear. So the housing targets and the future land use map are CCRCP's maps. Now, the map in our town plan, and when our town plan gets updated, we're going to have to incorporate that information, but those are their maps. So ideally, we are endorsing their maps because we're going to need to be using them. The planning commission has discussed them at several meetings. They are comfortable with the future land use map. They're comfortable with the housing targets. So on those two things, the planning commission is recommending that the select board provide support or endorse them for CCRPC. The big one really is that tier 1B designation. It says interim Act 250 exemptions that will expire. I think it's January 2027 if we don't get that tier 1B designation. And we do want that tier 1B designation. That helps us. It makes it easier for us to achieve the housing targets. One other thing about those housing targets, we don't exactly know how we're going to meet those housing targets. That is work that the planning commission still needs to take on. The work that the planning commission did in looking at the future land use map, particularly in the rural areas, and what those subtle differences mean, is going to help the planning commission in this next round of this enabling housing initiative that we're going to be taking on. But that's a tangent. It's really the tier 1B designation that we're looking for formal request from the select board tonight.
Are you looking for that now, or did you want to talk about something from the planning commission, or is that just what you meant, just what you just said?
That's just what I meant. I was going off on a tangent and I brought myself back on track.
Okay.
Yeah, because
But like, and if this tier 1B gets done, that these are our next steps. These are our next things that can flow from that.
Not exactly. So tier 1B will help us is one of the tools the town has to achieve the housing targets, because it will make it easier to do housing in the areas where we want to see housing and where the state wants us to see housing. So that's a low-hanging fruit that we just need to take advantage of now.
Yep.
Yeah, there are other things that we're going to need to do to help realize those housing targets. And that is the tangent that we will get to at another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the key is if you start developing Riverside, that really helps us a long way to meet our targets. It really does. But the other thing is that having listened to this presentation with the maps and from the RPC and the Hearts and Carpets and how they talked about it and everything for a long time. I mean, they worked very, very hard to come up with these things and do a great presentation, and they spent a long time talking to the board and to the all along the way. And I think it's a pretty cool thing. And if anybody's ready, I would move that the town of Jericho request tier 1B designation for all areas designated village centers and village areas in the regional future land use plan.
We have a motion. I did say that.
Oh, that's right.
That we would allow comment on
Discussion,
this
I'm
one.
sorry.
Yep, I had forgotten it too. Go ahead, Chuck.
So from the loyal opposition here. I'm concerned that this map further institutionalizes the fiction that Jericho will meet its housing obligations in the town centers and the village areas. The map assumes substantial infill in our suburban style developments of a half acre to 1 acre, which means people putting new houses in their front yards and backyards. When I asked the Regional Planning Commission for examples of infill in neighborhoods like this, with or without wastewater, they have no examples. I asked for examples anywhere in Vermont, they had none. I asked for examples anywhere, they had none. So this map is based on an unproven theory. We are playing with the housing aspirations of young people, people with families, single people, people who can't currently afford Jericho with an unproven theory. This map is further compromised by the restrictive covenants. I've been going through the land records. So far, I found 480 homes with restrictive covenants in neighborhoods preventing anything but single family homes in entire neighborhoods. The village area in this map is dominated by those restrictive covenants. There's not going to be any infill housing in most of the developments, the current developments covered by this map. A lot of the area added to this map in transition areas. I mean, the biggest properties are the high school ball fields, Mansfield Estates, Mansfield's common land, the common land for the new development off Morgan Road, and a lot of the other land has poor soils. To meet our housing obligations, we need dense housing projects, both in the village centers but that's gonna be limited, and we need them outside village centers. Right now, we have construction on a housing project, 8 luxury homes sited on about 10 acres with 40 bedrooms. Jericho's housing policy and the regional planning policy is to ban apartments. We can build 40 bedrooms of luxury housing on 10 acres, but we're not allowed to build apartments. And this map institutionalizes that point of view. So I think, you're probably gonna, and, the tier 1 designation is important, but I hope that you express your reservations to the planning commission for this map. It is not a realistic representation of where the housing is going to need to go and be for Jericho to meet its housing obligations. I congratulate the planning commission for sticking with the current housing projections. The regional planning's housing projections are very much influenced by the results of our exclusionary policies over the last 50 years. And I don't think that, our numbers should, I don't think we should benefit from that, in theory, benefit, from that exclusion. So I hope that you simply don't accept this map. I do think you need to apply for the tier 1, for the exemption that they're talking about, but this map is more of the same.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah.
Maria, I see you have a hand raised.
Yes, hi. Just for a clarification on the map, there's pink, there's light pink, and there's a magenta. So which is the tier 1B designation?
It's easy for that because the tier 1B applies to any of the pink areas. So dark pink, or purple, magenta, medium pink, I'll call it, and light pink. All of those are eligible for tier 1B. For Jericho, you only have 2 of those. There's the magenta village center and the light pink village area. You might see, yeah, sorry.
No, thank you, but I just want to remind the select board that the light pink area bordering Valley's Edge is common land owned by the homeowners of Valley's Edge.
Which goes to Chuck's point, I think is what you're saying. Yeah. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Yep.
As I've spoken to this subject before, I think the devil is in the details. That this appears to be giving something when in fact, as an owner of some of this land that's being downzoned, and for example, the Rivers' property is being downzoned.
But sorry, I don't know what downzone means. You mean making
In
more
effect, what happens is that there's a trade-off here. You have an institution, which is an organization at Act 250, a whole group of people. So they're giving up on certain zones in order to gain additional authority and control over other areas.
Oh.
So in effect, 250 will become a considerably greater burden in Jericho when we try to do infill under the auspices of saying we're protecting nature. And if you haven't gone through an Act 250 process, that it's expensive, it's time consuming, and it defeats all of the stated objectives of the town plan for areas that could be developed, because our map is in fact wrong. The village centers are predominantly undevelopable. So you're getting a wetland behind the store in Jericho Center. You've got highly restricted lands that cannot in fact legally be developed. And those are being traded for bringing a greater level of review onto the land that is actually feasible to be developed, because none of the maps in Jericho outline where we can actually practically build something and building it. And so Jericho can hopefully say, we're doing this because we have to, not because we want to. And we reserve looking at the detail in much greater level to be able to fulfill the goals, because right now this is a chameleon. It looks like it's something really good, but in fact, on the lands that I own and the lands that I know, it's not. It's going to interfere and make it much more difficult and much more expensive, and Jericho will not make its goals.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments? There's a motion on the floor.
I have a question.
I have a question.
Like, can I ask a question of? Oh, sure, Chuck. Okay. So Jim stated, I believe, I misspoke him, but basically we're saying we want all development to happen in this area, and in Jim's board of development just can't happen in that area because it's either unbuildable or it's got an HOA or whatever. And so we're gonna make building easier there, even though it's impossible to build there. And in exchange for making it easier to build there, we're gonna get it harder to build anywhere else. Does that summarize what you said, Jim? And is that what your concern is, Chuck?
I don't know that this is making it harder in other places. It's certainly not making it easier. And I think it's consistent with Jericho's view, I think mistaken view, that it's gonna meet its housing obligations in the village center, taking just Jericho Center. I'm an advocate for village centers. I want more housing in Jericho Center. Your current projection is for 110% increase in the number of dwellings in Jericho Center. Jericho Center is wet. You're looking for people to put new houses on their front yards and their backyards.
Yeah, no, I get all that.
I really don't think it's gonna happen. So as Jim is saying, yeah, you're gonna make it easier in Jericho Center.
But that's not.
There's no water.
Yeah.
There's no sewer. You've decided to bring in water to Jericho Center is not a priority. What is the point of making it easier in Jericho Center? And I am an advocate for new housing in Jericho Center.
And to make my point, Peter.
Well, I got it. Thank you. Can either of you gentlemen kind of speak to that at all?
Sure. Well, you want to start?
I'll take a shot at it first. Yeah. There is some validity that when you look at the pink and the magenta areas, that a lot of those areas are built out. There are HOA restrictions in those areas. It's not how much of that area, is it 50%, 60%, 80%? I don't think we know exactly. That's that drilling down, that's that next level of work that Jericho has to do to figure out what is really, what is our strategy going to be to help meet these numbers. We know in Riverside, there's the 15-acre Tetro property that's not developed. There are other 10-acre plus sites. There are not a lot of them, but there are larger sites in the village centers that can handle development. I can't rattle them off. I just, I've looked at a map and I've seen them. So I don't think it's as extreme as there's no place to develop, but I think it's accurate to say that, it's not an open field that's all pink, right? In terms of making it more difficult to develop in the areas outside the village centers.
Those are my words, not Chuck or Jim, not that, just.
Well, I think it's fair to say Jim was saying that it was going to be more difficult. It's maintaining the status quo. 250 applies in those areas now. That's going to stay. The area where it will get more difficult, well, I don't want to say more difficult. The area where there is potentially going to be more regulation is in this tier 3 designation. That's going to designate, high priority sensitive cultural, natural resources. Those are not mapped yet. That's what the state is currently going through a process to identify what those are.
And just to clarify, I think most of those are actually pretty well mapped. They're going to be clarified in terms of which of those portions of those maps and which of those resources are going to fall in that tier 3 jurisdiction and what will development review look like there. But I think we're fairly aware of where a lot of those resources are for the most part. In terms of will it be harder to develop there? It may be by adding Act 50 jurisdiction, but it's already pretty hard to develop in those tier 3 areas. I think what this question tonight is about is where can we enable possibilities and support possibilities that do exist for development in those compact centers that make it better for everyone where they exist. Developing in rural areas has consequences both in terms of it disrupts our aesthetic view of the landscape. It can create a wider, longer chain of infrastructure that is more costly to the town. That's not to say that we should never develop in rural areas. Sometimes that is the best option. But I think this is about looking at the village centers first and village areas around them and saying what possibilities exist there to meet our needs and how can we enable that. Part of the reason we have those transition areas for Jericho is a recognition that there are some limitations in those pink and purple areas and that we're going to need a little bit of both. And that transition area is a place where we see more opportunity with some further study that may not be as restricted as some of what has been called out tonight. But there are also questions about, a lot of these HOA restrictions across the state creating a barrier. And I think there's interest across the state in addressing that in some fashion. I can tell you how to solve it because it's complicated legally, but I think the point is any action that Jericho can take or any municipality can take to reduce the barriers that are not actually serving anyone and not serving current housing needs should be taken. And it seems like that's consistent with what the planning commission concluded and what they've recommended to the select board. And we still, CCRPC will still be helping Jericho identify those other opportunities for places that may be less limited. We'll be around to help do that planning work and provide resources to address those questions and meet those housing needs. We're all in this together.
I'll second the motion.
Can you repeat the motion? I kind of forget. This is just, because there's three things we have to consider. We have to accept the map, we have to accept the tier 1B, and we have to accept the housing targets.
Right. So what I made a motion for was to request tier 1B designation for all areas designated village centers and village areas in the regional future land use map.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So that one does pass.
That one passed. We're good. We got three. We got three of the five of us here. You guys are quiet. Yeah.
And because the maps will go into the. So I make a motion to endorse the regional future land use map.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. It's the third one that luckily Chris caught me. I was planning on getting a little snippy, but I am a little frustrated.
That's me tonight. I'm listening to you.
Yeah. On the housing targets.
Yeah.
I found it disappointing that Jericho didn't win the grant for helping us with the wastewater. And Chris helped me remind me or change my understanding of who we applied for. So I do understand that CCRPC is providing us a project manager to help us with the wastewater task force.
Yeah.
I thought it was CCRPC that we applied for the grant and the person, but he explained to me that we applied for the state. How can the state continue to put out targets and encourage growth in center zones when we all know that infrastructure is the key to making that happen and not approve our grant?
Yeah.
We cannot do this on our own. And if that's going to be the case, there is no point in these targets.
Of the 4 communities I've talked with in their select boards in the last couple of weeks, you were the 4th community to say exactly those words.
my God.
No, that
Wow.
was unique.
But you're all
Wow.
and everyone is great. There is going to be a huge need for infrastructure planning as a result of not just this work, but because of the housing crisis we've been facing. This was one of the major reasons that Act 91 went into effect, is to say, we need to understand what's out there. We need to understand what our housing needs are. We need to understand where we can develop and where we should develop and what the limitations are in those areas. And part of this process of us doing this regional plan and putting together this map is getting all of those details to bubble up to the surface so that when we go to the land use review board, we can say, all of these towns are really interested in meeting these housing targets, but they all need help. And we want to make sure that they're going to get that assistance. This law is set up to direct funding for infrastructure studies and potentially construction to those village centers, village areas, and the downtown centers and planned growth areas. That's one of those state incentives and community investment incentives that is going to be codified through these maps. The question, I think, is, the bigger question is maybe, is there enough to go around and how will that be prioritized? And I think
Sounds like nobody got the grants for those. The grant that I'm talking to from Phil to be is like funding for a project manager to help people like us design wastewater. It's
Yeah.
probably worded differently, but that's the general gist.
Mhm.
And we didn't get it.
Yeah.
So,
And several of Chittenden County communities applied for grants like that. I think, I can't remember if any of them got that specific wastewater study grant, but we're also, you're competing not only within Chittenden County, but across the state. And there's formulas that tell us how much everyone gets because Chittenden County can't take it all.
Well,
But
that sounds like Jeff.
it kind of led to believe that that we would get it. You know, it seems like when we go for a grant, I usually ask like, so like, we get it, are we not gonna get it, is it up in the air? And like, I feel like, and I could be wrong, I could go read the minutes, but I probably won't. I feel like we were kind of thinking we'd get it.
we hoped you would. We thought there was a good chance. And we don't make the decisions. We hope to be more involved in those decisions by advocating for our communities and the work that you've done and saying, look, Jericho's not only, worked with us to do this map and, support these housing targets, but they have their own housing targets. They're doing their own studies to see where they can enable this growth to happen. And they're gonna, try to make it happen regardless, but it really would help if they got some more assistance. So we will be trying to do that work that we've already been doing at the legislature to say, we need more funding for planning, we need more funding for infrastructure if we're going to meet these housing needs, which have been identified as something that is a huge priority for the state. The legislature, the governor, every person you talk to says most people you talk to say that housing is a big issue.
That's why there's a big fight over whether the chip went through for the smaller towns or not. And it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out because, we hear a lot about that in the RPC and that Chittenden County often gets excluded because they want to put more money into the other parts of the state.
I'm done with my little quick, thank you.
I think we're at the end, but I did want to,
I think we still need a motion.
oh, sorry,
to
that's
approve
right,
that-
the housing target, right?
Approve the housing target if anyone wants to put that motion forward.
I make a motion formally into CCRPC's housing targets for Jericho.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So what I was gonna say was, I did want to, thanks, the planning commissions spent a good amount of time at their meetings. I know there are a couple members here, Eric, Susan, and Sabina are here. But I did want to call out, Susan, Sabina, and SJ, who were on the working group that looked at the future land use map and literally spent hours going through that map, and providing some really detailed comments to, CCRPC. So I just, we had a really strong working group. I just wanted to acknowledge their work on this.
And your word too, Chris. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is to discuss recommendations for the town meeting reimagined. FY
7.
Ask a question as
There was-
we're walking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we postponed it.
That thing, so if I want more information about that, should I just talk to Paul about that offline, about the Bentley Lane thing? If I want to just get my head around it better, just talk to Paul about that.
Yeah, we got a pretty good
Or talk to
about
Chris
it in the-
actually, because it's voting.
in our packet.
Yeah, there's you should
Pretty
have,
well detailed. in-
yep,
Yeah, there's even comments.
yep.
There's some maps that are hard to read, but.
Yep.
Hi,
Hello.
Good evening.
we're back. So I, sorry, I'm gonna go back and forth with glasses. I gave up on my concept of bifocals, it doesn't work, so it's fine. Also, the town meeting, obviously, we've gone through a year, now we're looking forward. Well, we've figured out that I would guess it's about half, or there's slightly more than half of the folks who were involved are willing to be
That's
involved
great.
with the next year. We did not get any new volunteers, and I'm personally a little worried about that because there's still a lot of work ahead. When I came last time, Catherine and Eric were here, and it wasn't, we really didn't have time to talk through some of the recommendations, but I got a sense that there were
you know, we somehow the choice of the library came up, and I left concerned that there might be areas that the select board has strong opinions on. And I'd like to understand a couple things, what those are. Clearly, the location of the town meeting is one of those. So what, are there other things that jumped out at you as you looked at our recommendations, that you're uncomfortable with? And second is that like, no, you can't, like, don't even bother studying it. We really want you to, I'll pick on the library just to give you a.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most contentious one that I remember, and I'm not.
Well, Eric, before you go there.
Yeah, go ahead.
But can I just use it as an example of what I'm
Yes.
asking tonight? My question is, could you give me a sense, and again, I'll just use the library as an example. We had lots of back and forth in our group, but the location that it was pretty universal in the task force. And we thought the library would be a better location for sound, for minimizing the distance between the sort of perceived distance and separation between the people in the room and the people attending by Zoom. And there were, you know, and the library can accommodate more people than I would have thought, based on what the school has said. The reason it matters is that we're looking at what is the best technology to accomplish what we want to get done. And so let's not progress and make, investments in technology.
On one route and then.
Yeah.
And also what space is most amenable as infrastructure for that technology?
So my question is for the things that jumped out at you, are you saying, please, we really want to stay in the auditorium? And in fact, we're going to be very unlikely to approve something else. I would just like to know that about any of the things that jump out at you. Or are you saying, here are our concerns, and I'd like you to alleviate those concerns if you decide to change the location? But just so that I don't ask the task force to do a bunch of work, that then, if you've already made up your mind, and it's okay to tell me now, I'll be really annoyed later if I've got 8 people doing a whole bunch of work, and I come back, and it's like clear that no matter what we do, you really wanted us to stay in the auditorium. So
Let me,
we'll solve that.
Yeah, that's not the question.
That's not my question.
Okay,
The
but I
question
do want to answer the question.
no, not now.
She's asking us,
She used that as an example. She didn't ask you the question.
My first question is, are there other things besides the location that jump out at you? And second, that once we've identified where are the issues, and for you, it's just the location, so great, maybe that's true for everybody else. Then we'll dive in and say, what are the questions and what do you really want us to solve?
And may I add the other dimension, which I think is critical here, is that last year, through whatever process, we were late. And one of the reasons we're here is to jumpstart this year, so we get the August or early September meeting, not that same meeting way late in the year's development of the budget. And so
we also now understand better what that meeting's for. That's where, for example, the public questions really need to be examined. And we didn't really understand that last year until we had gone through the process.
we found out.
so the comment I'd like to make is last time we had those suggestions, and I had about maybe 4 minutes. I had taken 4 minutes. I probably had more, but I had taken about 4 minutes to read them. And Peter wasn't here.
Right.
And Catherine and I are like, yeah, the library one is the one that kind of stuck with me. And then you're like, oh gosh, that's the biggest, like, that's literally it. There was no like, absolutely nothing. I was just like, ooh, boy, that one makes me nervous. That's the decision that's as far as we got. And then in that, I'm like, we really need to decide as a board. Like, we can't, one, I didn't want to do it without Peter. Two, I want to do it without like having time to think about it.
Yeah, and I'm not asking you tonight to decide. I don't think that's why we're here. It was more to hear, what are your concerns about it? And can the task force, can I set a group off of can we set the task force to look at that location decision with your comments in mind and then come back with a recommendation? And would you, and knowing that you would be open to whatever we, not rubber stamp it, but would at least,
Sure.
reconsider.
Would it work for you to go through suggestion by suggestion and read it, and then we can have some quick dialogue? Would that work for you, or?
Sure, I highlighted.
Yeah, I think there might be prominent ones that we're most eager to.
Sure,
Well,
so
let me just quickly, on page 7, I read it a couple times. On page 7, the last 2 bullets, those seem to me kind of to be saying the same thing and contradictory to each other. Consider the public question initiated by select board and require vote by Australian ballot. I didn't understand those 2 paragraphs.
These were the different suggestions that
Yeah,
came up. That came to us.
So it's important for you to understand the structure of the document we gave to you. The first page is the recommendations that we want you to address. The rest of the document is a full record of all the ideas that floated.
Yeah.
Not what we're saying we want to talk about or recommend. We need to work from the first page.
That page 7, in other words.
It's
they are
not in here,
contradictory.
but
They're not.
that's my problem.
Because
it's
some
not
people
in,
said one,
no, it's in
and
our
some people
previous
said
one,
misunderstood
when
this. I
she,
thought this was
I can
a
go and
problem
grab
and then
it.
your suggestions.
Yeah, those are the
Um,
things, the problem and the suggestions we heard. But I would highlight that one. The ones that I thought, I'm happy to go through them all, but the ones that jumped out to me that I think are worth highlighting to you are, because for one, we would suggest having the same 3-meeting structure in the same time, that basically the timing would be similar, that we not look at designing, for example, a system where we would have the pre-discussion on the first Tuesday in March and then vote in April. Our thought is, this is the first try, try it again, making the improvements that we heard before we dive into making major changes. And that we would have a
Micro changes as
fall,
opposed to big structural changes.
yeah, that we would have the fall brainstorm, the winter, really town meeting and reimagined
Draft budget
to
review.
create to review the draft budget and then have townspeople make recommendations to the select board as to the budget that goes for the vote on town meeting day. So that's one
I think we're in
piece.
agreement. Are we in agreement on that one?
On that idea, the same structure?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But starting earlier,
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
start.
for the same
with-
basic three events.
So certainly start with the publicity earlier, start with the clarity about what the purpose is of that first meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things that it is important is that the select board and the task force have to work together to get that into the conscience of the people interested in town government, meaning the citizens that actually might show up. So that we get this idea of the citizen petitions being something that are part of the process and that they should show up for discussion at the first meeting, at the kickoff meeting, because that's how they're gonna grow. If they're good ideas and the public is behind them, then that gives those ideas a chance to grow and mature. And a key part of that is we learned from that proposal for a major amount of money that came as a motion on the floor of the budget review meeting. It would have been much better had that started as an idea earlier at the kickoff meeting so that the town knew about that idea and that $20,000 or whatever it was in advance.
Next one, again.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So we talked about the location, and that was another highlight that I wanted to pull out.
Where is that? What page is that on?
First thing.
Don't-
I mean,
Base.
that's just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And if I may keep jumping in, I'm sorry.
That's why.
But I just want to make sure that there's another piece that's in there. It says analyze the tech and space needs. That's true regardless of the space decision. So it's important for the library, because one of the things that was clear is that we didn't have the infrastructure we needed, particularly things like microphones, to make that meeting really work. The budget review.
Both
The
Yeah.
January one.
They're both of them, yeah.
One of the things I heard when I did come quickly, you know, even in that exchange, one of the things we talked about is it with that whole lot of people spread out all over the auditorium, it makes the sound really hard to manage. So we said, you know, is there a way, or you said, is there a way to force people to sit up front, like block off access? And I would turn it back to you, like, do you think that's really possible? I just don't think people do what you tell them to do. If you tell them to, people I know, when you tell them to sit in a certain place, that is the one place they are not gonna sit. And
My wife stepped in for 2 minutes. There's no way she would have walked up and sat down and listened for even that long. If she
Yeah.
had to sit up there.
you know, it's
I
just,
get it.
yeah, people think they're only stopping by, they're gonna, anyway. You know, those are the kinds of, we can relook again, but choosing the space and the technology kind of go together. We
The
gotta
space
make,
has to precede the technology.
well,
the
they sort of
space
go
decision.
together. Because
It is,
we're
yeah,
The space decision.
The particular
needs to be
decisions
finalized
about the-
before money is spent on technology.
yeah, it's before money spent, but you
Right.
can, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Here's my thought on are we ready to talk about the space? Because it sounds like that's the big. Okay, thank you.
You have our permission.
It makes me nervous to, like, what I like about it, although it's a little intimidating, is like, we can see everybody. You know, we're up, there's like this separation, we can see all the hands, I can look over and I can see Dave. And for some reason, when I think about the first meeting in the library, I couldn't see anybody, right? Like I can't picture how it's physically gonna be set up where I could, like, even here, right? Like, there's someone I know in the audience, I didn't notice he was here until an hour in, right? So like, it's like, even here, I can't see everybody. I don't know how that would go at a town meeting where we want as much participation as we can get. I can't visualize it in the library. I'm not saying it's not possible, I'm saying I can't visualize
Yeah,
it.
it's helpful to read that way.
May
I think
I-
one along those lines is we heard a lot about, we want to see the people who are online.
Yeah.
And so somehow bringing them in, to us, it felt like that division and that visibility would be easier in the library. So that's, I agree, I hear you. So I made that note, helpful.
So one of the things in my past is building set designs for a school that had no stage. So it was all done in the room of the library. And we had exactly that problem. And we did it with movable platforms. And those exist I mean, I've seen MMU using those for their play sets. So I think the solution is already in place in MMU. We can get you guys high enough.
If we can find out a way that I really want to be able to see everybody, I think that's really important.
Yeah. it's helpful to
If
hear.
that's solved, I think that's most of my concern. I do think that first meeting, the audio was horrible, right? Like, it was so weird. We had it was our first meeting. We knew it was gonna be bad. The
October 5th.
Yeah, October 5th, yeah.
And so I'm assuming that that's gonna lead into what you guys are gonna go research and figure out how to make it perfect and
Yeah,
all
that's-
that, but.
And
Those are my two concerns of why I kind of quickly went to, ooh, that makes me lose.
Fortunately, we have Angelica. She's going to be really helping us developing those solutions.
Yeah, I had thought about, well, maybe, you know, because the key that you could see everybody sitting there, but then I thought about sitting on the bleachers for 3 hours. You know, instead of, you know, just the library, you know, I was thinking, well, there's more seats in the Kiva than there is in the library. That's why I asked the question, how many people can the library fit?
We will obviously work with that, but it was more than, I was surprised by the number. I'm not gonna say the number because I'll get it wrong, but.
We had
it was
70.
higher than I would have thought.
We had 70 at the kickoff meeting,
Right.
and that was easy, there was plenty of room left.
Or was it 70 then? Yeah, I thought it
So-
was less than 70.
Well, I don't know, maybe,
But in.
okay, 50, I'll take 50.
It was,
But the point is, we could easily see double that, and that's roughly what we had in,
I thought, yeah, we will definitely, we can't, the answer is we don't know, and we will obviously figure that out. Do you have a number in mind that you would want to be able to accommodate physically in the main room, I guess, Catherine, as you asked that question, or do you, or is that just something you want us to consider, which?
I just wanted to consider it because, because we want to make sure the numbers can grow.
Yeah,
From
me too.
what was this year.
Yeah.
And, can the library accommodate a larger number than we accommodated in town meeting?
Yeah.
The 23rd.
Yeah. The answer is yes. How many I will find out.
The big thing for me is the technology piece.
Yeah.
Which one person on the board, I feel the town needs to be willing to spend money on to get the system that we own literally and just metaphorically. We know how it works. We know what to do. We're not trying to get Mike Weston to hand us a cord to go over to here. We know what it is. We can put it in place. We know how to run it. And I would imagine it's gonna involve multiple, like 2 of these. One which has just the budget on it in an Excel format that is scrollable and readable, and the other one which is Zoom people who can be projected to the front, and there's enough bodies in the room to do the technology smoothly.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
then the other piece for me is we need to, this is, we gotta figure out the voting. So
Yeah, the voting is on my list.
the voting is the big thing, because that $30,000 thing came down to one vote, and it was, one vote, and it was chaotic, and I don't feel comfortable.
And nobody was sure
That
whether
was
that was
accurate.
correct.
And we've
or
gotten
not.
a lot of
No,
feedback.
we
on it.
know, I know we have,
Yeah.
the voting, we definitely have on our list. One of the elements of the voting that I highlighted to raise in front of you is that requiring participants to identify themselves, whether they're in the room or on Zoom, is a likely component of that clarity around voting. And moving more slowly. It's hard for it's hard, Dave's work as moderator, it's hard to manage, just see who's in the room, but to then also figure out the pace of something you're not even seeing is really, that was something that was a big learning process.
yeah, and that will be something that I work with the online coordinator, which was Maria, and I hope she will do it again.
I think we're going to have a person in the room whose only job was to coordinate with Maria, and they are your.
I'm not necessarily sure you're right, because then there's a third person
Yeah.
involved in that communication link. I mean, you may be right, and I'm willing to try to think about
We
it.
did have a whole team, like Maria did have other people, there were people in the room and there were people online.
Yeah.
So,
But I
but I
think-
think that it comes down to, people are gonna need to, online, we're gonna have to have people identify themselves and and because we feel it's important not to have requirements for the folks participating online that we don't have for the people who are in the room. That, and plenty of towns do that. They have a non-obtrusive ways of having folks identify themselves. You walk in, you get a card, because you're on the voter list or whatever it is.
I'm a little bit anxious about that, and then I feel like in the past, it's just been like, David says like, hey, heads up, reminder, you can only vote if you're a resident of the town, please don't vote. And then we move on, and now we're gonna be
Right.
requiring something of people, and if you show up without your wallet, oh crap, now I can't vote, or I just.
Yeah,
I
and
just worry-
it's to vote on a technically non-binding.
Right, I just worry a little bit about,
Even though we're binding.
I agree, we can't make Zoom more challenging than in person, but I worry about in general, making participation.
The question
more
is, do you
complex.
live in town?
Yes,
And
right.
who are you and do you
Yeah.
live in town? It's not hard. It's not, and
If you're on
and
Zoom,
that,
it can
but
be
on
hard.
Zoom, you have to be able to put your name on, there are 2 people in the Zoom box or 1.
That's hard.
And,
That's hard for people to change the name in their Zoom box, that's challenging.
right. Well, then they need to be seen.
Right.
But that's the kind of thing we
Yeah.
gotta figure out.
Because even if you
because
just have the one.
Counting the votes, if you get, you know.
Box, $2. Yeah.
This, just so you know, within the task force, that's been, you've hit right on the discussion we've had.
Yeah, I'm guessing we're pretty.
We've got the issue sort of well outlined with this exact, and I come into it and I say, wait a minute, I hardly, I just trusted people in the room and now we're gonna, I came at it from the same exact direction, but then there's this whole thing about, well, how does it work online? And then, okay, do we have to make it, I mean, those elements then fall very quickly into the discussion.
And it doesn't have to be a really difficult thing. I mean, I've had to make presentations in other towns. I'm not a voter. They ask that I sit over here, and it's not a big deal.
To your point about the two screens, that's actually on this list on the first page. And the whole idea of getting the budget projected in a way so that it's user friendly, rather than in the form that it's in the report. Or somehow have them both that way. I'm not sure where we're going with that. We'd be happy to work with you to think about what the best way to get the citizen to work with us during the meeting, but it's got to change. So that it's easier for people to know where they are and what we're talking about quickly.
And the other part of that was to develop a way to, when there is a vote, to just live type and put up in front of people, what is it that we're voting on?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we're gonna go to making sure the motion is visible.
That stuff didn't seem, I hadn't highlighted it, but it was in there.
That was
but-
all, yeah, and I read this when you first sent it out like 2 months ago.
Yeah. The other thing that we heard a lot of, and this is the page 7 that we heard differing, suggestions around, is when there is, however you want to, there was a motion to, that added up to $5,000, and there was a motion that added up to $30,000. And people clearly, no one ever complained about the $5,000 one. And then we heard a lot of noise about the $30,000 one. Whether that's because of the amount or whether it's because of what it is, I'll leave,
Oh, we're
but
gonna
there was-
assume it's because of what it was. Like this group here, I know what $5,000.
But it was so close, I think.
Yes, it was exactly.
A lot of money and
With the
very-
30,000 was.
Exactly, and so there were some suggestions that said anything over $10,000 require it go to Australian ballot. Anything over, and what we talked about this a lot. And where we came up was exactly that. What if it was unanimous and there was no like it was obvious? Then why not leave it? Remind them, you have the discretion anyway, remind you that you have the discretion. And you can choose whether to have a separate separate vote on the ballot. So that you could warn a budget of X. And then there would be a separate question warning an additional item.
To have that ability to decide that in the meeting after the motion was made, right? So the motion is made, it's passed, and it's 30 to 40, and we're like, we're gonna add $50,000 in budget, and then we have to say, okay, then why don't we?
Or if you even just
Like,
do
I felt last time we really didn't have that ability because of the tightness of getting that language into the printer, right? We were like the printer.
We know what we were doing, we were kind of making.
Right,
pressure.
Well, we also
that
wanted-
would have had to go to the printers that night or something,
We also wanted people to know that we were going to take them
It's
seriously.
true, and that, I like that, and I just think it would have been nice to have that as an option.
Well, I think we've been through this now.
Mhm.
Again, it's something we learned. And I think I don't know that you'd want to compromise. I think the reason this worked was because the select board made a commitment to listen to and the reason, it all got uncomfortable is that you had agreed to abide by what we did. Now, we didn't know there would be a decision by one vote and that we would not all feel confident in the vote itself and that it would be a fairly large amendment. I am actually quite appreciative that we had that opportunity. It was a lot of learning
Me too.
in 1 year.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's right.
we wouldn't have
We'll get closer than that.
Yeah, we couldn't have had a better thing happen for our own education.
Yeah.
And what I think is an important thing, I'm gonna say it now in public, just so people, I'm gonna keep saying it in public over and over between now and next town meeting or next, regular meeting, is that people were emailing me, and probably you guys too, about this is ridiculous that 54 people added $30,000. And I always wrote back, I hear what you're saying, and just so you know, the entire budget was passed for $4 million every year before this by that small group.
Right.
So people are angry about $30,000, but this is way more input than we've ever had in this town ever.
Right.
I think it's important to,
And
and
it
if
wasn't
we're gonna completely
54.
we're gonna neuter that meeting of any power, then the meeting's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Which, yeah,
So that's
exactly.
what we really, that's what we were balancing all the way through, is that we want people to have access and we want them to have a meaningful role. And so having that vote is a meaningful role. And that's what that whole debate was about in March 2024.
Yeah.
So,
Are there, so I'm a little concerned about time. We've got some people
Well-
waiting for some other agenda. Are there other items on this list where you really need some direction from the board to help
Well,
you, help inform you?
two things. One is, and I don't think they're what part of what I'm envisioning our group is going to do is figure out where is it that we, the technology, the voting, the technology and location are linked. And then we gotta go ahead and plan and execute. And some of this, with technology, we may need some professional support. And so you'll hear from us to the extent that we see expenses coming. The other is the public questions. That really ends up in the fall. I wanted to just highlight that again.
Do you have a system to, and I hear what you're saying, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, so, I'll ask you offline.
The other thing that is just, this feels obvious, but it comes up all the time. There are people who just say, why don't we just go back? Or they say, this whole process is just a way of getting around, the Australian ballot that we all wanted. And I'm constantly having to remind people, no, this is what we voted on. We voted to create an interim meeting before having an Australian ballot. That was what we came to and why it was such a strong vote in 2024 March. It would have been closer, I think. So anyway, that either go back or just go all the way option comes up a lot. And our rule is implementing what was passed.
Right.
And we've
You
now,
can't go back.
and we're now giving you
Well, we
the
could
chance
go
to,
back, but you have.
It would
you can do
require,
as a
it would require an
petition,
action,
an
right?
action.
yeah,
Lovely question.
You guys can't decide to go back.
Right.
Right.
The town could, they could, but that would be
Someone-
through an Australian ballot vote.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you for this
Thank
work
you.
and agreeing to continue it. And hopefully we've given you
Yeah,
guidance going forward and,
and if you know anyone, right, and other than recruiting them to run for the select board, but join the task force.
yeah, sell the task force members.
Yeah, we could use
Fair enough.
more people. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next item on the agenda is Slower and Safer Streets. Why, What, and How by Bernie Paquette.
Let me see it on your computer.
Oh, sorry.
Good God.
Yes.
Good afternoon, my name is Bernie Paquette. I live on Brown's Trace in Jericho, author of this report. I'll talk tonight. I feel like I know we're pressed for time, but I really feel like I need to talk briefly about the safety need. Then I'll talk about a little bit about the neighborhood desire And most importantly, the key part of it is the speed control features. So it's slower and safer streets, what, why, and how. This proposal advocates for safer, more comfortable neighborhoods in Jericho by addressing the dangers and impacts of speed. It urges the select board to approve comprehensive safety improvement package. This appraisal focuses on safety and comfort in neighborhoods. In each neighborhood of Jericho, residents want to feel safe and comfortable. When families walk, when friends meet up to bike, when pulling out of their driveway, coming to a stop at an intersection, or crossing the street, we all want to feel safe, especially in our neighborhood. Speeding undermines pedestrian safety and comfort both physically and mentally. Speeding is ruinous, it's destructive, it's an intimidator. It's most cruel to the young and the elderly. Speeding is dangerous, threatening, and degrading. Beyond a doubt, abatement of speeding in our community is desirable and it's wholly practicable. Speed limit regulations are a tool for economic efficiency, potentially saving money, fuel, and lives. Speed limits are a social compact under an umbrella we call the law. If we chip away at when and who follow the law, we risk it having no law, no social compact for communal well-being. Speeding is a reminder of a crude race with no finish line, and enlightened people should not tolerate it. This social behavior, speeding, is a selfish product of not caring for the well-being of others, of relinquishing control to machines, of impatience, and of rudeness. This is not who we are in this community. Is it not self-constraint, a containment of our inward impulse that shines in our politeness? In our demonstrations of caring and kindness? We need continuous devotion to communal safety in every neighborhood. The select board represents the town as a sponsor, providing the overall vision and direction for safety projects, ensuring that it aligns with the town goals. The 2024 town plan states Jericho's vision is to be a community where residents and visitors can travel safely through an interconnected network of trails, paths, sidewalks, and streets, giving us choices on how we get to the places we want to go. We need multiple strategies, multiple features to enable safer roads and speeds. We should implement infrastructure enhancements that have been shown to successfully reduce speed to a relatively compliant level with the posted speed limit. The Slower and Safer Street Report was developed using 40 state and federal references, including current and past travel studies. The select board meeting dialogue from 2018 through 25 about traffic calming was studied. Crash reports were reviewed. One-on-one interviews were conducted. A neighborhood meeting was held encompassing both presentation and discussion. Guidance was sought from representatives from other cities and towns. This report scrutinized safety features to find out not only proven and effective measures, but those that fit in our town, to create a base list for each neighborhood to choose from, a package that works for the residents who are living there. Whatever your views and safety experiences are, please give added weight on the scale for any neighborhood that comes to you with a detailed, studied, and reasoned plan describing the need, the public resolution in that neighborhood for action and proven safety features. This is a reasoned, data-backed and detailed plan for both physical and perceptual speed control tactics to influence self-governed, and that's an important point, self-governed driving behavior. The ask tonight is for safety and comfort for my neighbors my neighbors and I live. The ask is a suite of features that provide more safety as a whole than the sum of their parts. This is a pared down, well scrutinized list. The town plan commits us to developing and configuring the village growth areas to be cohesive, walkable, and enjoyable. Commits us to prioritizing safety for all users over speed for vehicles on all Jericho roads, using low design speeds, traffic calming, complete streets features through updated public works specifications, road maintenance practices, and capital budget. These are not my words. These are this is the town plan we put a lot of work into. Commits us to prioritize the safety and convenience of non-motorized users of all abilities. The plan further states Jericho's roads need to be safe travel corridors for pedestrians, for bicyclists, and vehicle drivers. Excessively fast vehicle speed is a concern for many Jericho residents. While enforcement has a role in reducing speeds, the town can use other strategies, again, from the town plan. The town plan states we will prioritize speed reduction and safety for pedestrians and cyclists, and that the village centers and the commercial districts are hubs for social engagement, art and cultural activities, education, residences, and local businesses. All of these statements from the town plan were crafted for tactical action. I asked the select board to follow through. Say yes to the suite of 10 being requested tonight. Commit to all 10 goals and expectations in line with the town plan's priority. Relinquish the details and the fine tuning to those who take on project management. Set the direction and hand over the minutia, the details, to the people with the expertise at implementation. Let's demonstrate a process that gets the job done effectively, efficiently, and transparently with the right people doing the right job at the right time. Many areas in Jericho need speed control and safety attention, including Barber Farm, Brown's Trace, Lee River, Skunk Hollow, Plains Road at Jericho Corners, Route 15, Riverside, Governor Peck. Each neighborhood and street, though, is unique, but they share a common need for traffic to slow down by design rather than through enforcement. Within this proposal, I suggest criteria that the select board can use to decide on how any neighborhood safety concern or proposal, including this one. And I think that's called a process that somebody could, in any neighborhood, could fall back on and realize that there is a defined process on how to bring this forward, these concerns forward. So this proposal is about creating community safety norms. It's about achieving slower vehicle speeds, increasing the safety and perception of safety for non-motorized users, increasing the quality of life in residential and commercial areas, and lastly, increasing, as long as we feel it's a necessity for outliners, increasing the cost efficiency for the money we spend on police enforcement. Let's get more value out of those dollars. Visitors and folks passing through obviously are welcome in Jericho. However, we don't need to allow them to disrupt our community's quality of life or risk the safe use of our streets and sidewalks. Page 3, please. I'm sorry. I'm Yeah, if you wanna jump ahead.
Oh, I didn't know we were supposed to.
No, that was-
I'm like waiting.
Effective speed in a crash with pedestrian. Thank you, Paul. You hold there.
Mhm.
In Vermont, an average of 6 pedestrians and 1 bicyclist die on the roads each year, and around 130 are hospitalized. 69% of pedestrian fatalities occur in rural areas. This is a rural area. Please take a moment to reflect on the pedestrian fatalities in Jericho and throughout Vermont. Slide 4, please. A pedestrian hit by a car going 30 miles per hour has a 40% chance of being killed. Over 3,000 cars a day on average go along ground straits at 30 to 45 miles an hour. Our streets are not slow and safe. In 2013, 463 cars traveled at 30 to 35 per day. Last year, it was 1,902. At 35 to 40, we've gone from 107 to 1,060 cars a day. This is not a good trend. Next slide, please. 256 travel at greater than 40 to 45. 22 cars a day travel at 50 miles an hour. A
This is in the
pedestrian
center,
hit-
right? This is at the center location, not just Brown's Trace, the whole length, right?
This is north of, this specific set is north of the center total, going both ways, according to the CCRCP report.
But the whole report is contained by Barber Farm, from Barber Farm Road to Plains Road on.
Yeah, but I know where it's contained. I just thought it would be good for people who haven't read that report.
It's in the 25-mile-an-hour zone.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the reference. 256 at greater than 40 to 45, 22 at 50 or higher. A pedestrian hit by a car going 50 per miles per hour has all above 50 and above, has almost 100% chance of dying. On an average day, right? We're out there walking, you just happen to be there at the wrong time. 6 cars a day are going greater than 70 miles an hour. I mean, I don't even care if that's a state police going in emergency, 70 miles an hour. If somebody's crossing the road, there's just no way that's gonna come to a good conclusion. Our roads are not safe or slow and safe, ours are not slow and safe streets. We need to implement a plan for physical and perceptual speed control features to influence self-governed driving behavior. Speed control. We can encourage people to make choices that will benefit them in the long run. When applied to public roadways, the logic goes that when drivers are comfortable with their surroundings, this isn't intuitive, when they're comfortable with their surroundings, they're less likely to pay attention. So traffic engineers design cues into the roadways that spur people into changing their behavior without realizing it. One more. So, okay, back up, I'm sorry. I lost where I was, but close enough. Sorry, thank you.
No, you're fine.
The Vermont Traffic Safety Toolbox lists speeding countermeasures that have been proven to reduce speeding. They have backup files showing case studies in Vermont. Where implemented in Vermont, many of these speed controls have successfully reduced speeds to a relatively compliant level with the posted speed limit. The 3 main speed control types identified by the state are 1, vertical deflections, like speed humps, raised intersections. 2, horizontal deflections, like lane narrowing or street narrowing. And 3, perceptual or passive measures, like pavement markings. So this proposal takes that state information in mind. These aren't things I came out of my head or anybody else that I interviewed. So here's a brief description of the recommended control roadway features from the state of Vermont. Now, thank you. So median island, CCRCP talks about between 50 and 100 feet long. I'm proposing 100-foot long The most effective is a concrete curb with a vegetation median. It's appropriate at both entrances to Jericho Center. It does create a 9-foot travel lane for that 100 feet. The curb costs are $7 to $12 a foot. Recommended lighting, solar lighting, probably $1,000 to $1,500, rough estimate. Proposal would be one near, where it happens to be near where I live, but along the guardrails before it gets to the house. So neither side would have a house adjacent to it. After the first one proves its effectiveness, I would recommend that we install a second one on the other end of Brown Trace before the store. Next slide, please. So that's a picture of the other end. Second item feature is a raised crosswalks. Proposal will be one near the community center, one at JCS or a refab of the one that's there, or improvement, or fill the holes at least, I guess. And one at the crosswalk near the Cleary's house, which is a little south of the store, I guess. There is a crosswalk there, but it's not a raised walk. So a little bit of information about raised crosswalks. 28%, this is again from the state, 28% projected reductions in the 85th percentile speed, and absolute reductions to 27 miles or less have been reported. According to Josh Arnson, the Richmond's town manager, who has spent a fair amount of time interviewing, complaints about the speeders diminished after the installation of the speed humps on Cochrane Road. They're spaced, as the state recommends, within roughly 500 feet. I think they're a tenth of a mile, or about 528 feet apart. The road department installed them in Richmond, installed them themselves. The foreman, Peter Goslin, told me that the cost for materials was about $340 per speed hump. I had to go look at that 3 times to make sure I got that number right. That's what he told me the material cost was. Next slide, please. Lane or street narrowing is using pavement markings and or physical barriers. Again, location in this instance is the 25-mile-an-hour zone on Brown's Trace. They carry about a 4% speed reduction potential. There's significant, 4 significant reductions in effective street width are required to dramatically reduce speeds. The stats that is from both federal and state have told me. The evidence shows that the lines as narrow as 9 feet can still be safe for driving. The paved section right now is 24 feet wide. At a travel lane of 9 feet, the fog line can be painted at 9 feet from the center, leaving it 3 feet outside the travel lane, bike lane, etc. Government studies have concluded that reduced lane width via painted fog lines gives a perspective of narrowing of streets and can be effective in slowing traffic. The proposal is to make the travel lane narrower on the entire 25-mile-an-hour speed zone section that it is on the 35, meaning 9 feet versus 10.2. This means that the lines would taper to a narrow width once entering the 25-mile-an-hour zone and staying so until it reached, again, the 35-mile zone on the other end, thus giving drivers a visual cue and a constant reminder that they've transitioned, they see that it's changing, and then they have that visual reminder that they're in an area of slower speed. Next one, please.
I gotta go grab it, because
Yep.
it was the second half of yours.
So pavement markings, while she's pulling it up, are a constant reminder of the slower speed, and those are applicable clearly townwide. One set that I have looked at a little bit, that's used in places in Vermont are called Dragon's Teeth. We have them here near Joe's, some of the intersections, not vertical, but horizontally. So we've obviously painted them, stenciled them in places.
Can you see that?
Wait, we have these? You lost.
Not a vertical, but we have Dragon's Teeth.
This is his
showing
next set of
an
slides.
intersection.
It's,
So the
he had to
teeth go
separate
across
them.
this way. So I don't pretend to say that I can tell you now how would we contract
see
that
me
out, who
lose
to do it, what would it
everything?
cost.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do it with our equipment, obviously,
Perfect.
but I wanted to offer an example of markings,
Another
visual
way.
markings that there are choices. Another one is another idea is
There you
to,
go, thank you.
where we
Perfect.
stencil today at 25 miles an hour.
Thank you.
That marking, we could consider marking those after we leave the 35 miles and enter the 25, every 500 feet, instead of just at the few locations that we have today. Again, a visual reminder, and I would argue that paint is relatively inexpensive, right? There's obviously some labor, but at least we now have the tools, we have the stencils, it's at least doable. Slide 12, please. So there's a couple items here that are outside of the state approved list. Whether they consider them or not, I don't know. One of them is a zebra crosswalk marking, which just gives you an idea of what can be done creatively. Those on the bottom left corner give the driver a sense that there's depth there. Parking lines for the parking lot across from Jericho Country Store, my understanding is that is a publicly owned or town-owned property, but we're allowing parking there. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's not town-owned or not. But if it is, I'm recommending we consider parking lines there. Again, I won't go into too much detail about why, but the store owner and I have discussed that and feel that that would be helpful safety-wise. Again, so I'll point out the town did purchase a few years ago a striping machine, so they can do stencils, as you know, with the trailer and the equipment. So they can do some markings, assuming they had time to do them. The last piece is these horizontal lines. Again, I don't have the details on what it would cost, who could do it, that kind of thing. But these horizontal lines have been seasoned in a number of areas, particularly coming up on curves. And the idea is that instead of vertical lines, they're horizontal lines, but the spacing is changed as you move forward. And it gives the driver, well, let me read off what I've read about this in a book. The lines become closer as you reach the curve. This was thought for applicable for just before coming to the store from heading north. The lines get progressively narrower as drivers approach the sharpest point of the curve, giving them the illusion that they're speeding up and nudges them subconsciously to slow down, to tap their brakes, if you will.
Bernie, could we kind of speed through to the ask section? If you could, wrap up and get to the what decisions are in front of us that are we looking for?
Okay, the next slide. So maintenance and signage. I mean, and this is like something I think we just should be doing anyway. Repair, install the raised crosswalk, reinstall the portable sign in the middle of the crosswalks that we used to have that are now gone for some reason. Follow the CCRCP recommendations, add a chevron sign, a raised crosswalk warning sign, move the 25-mile-an-hour sign closer to the road, and add 15-mile-an-hour signs before the raised crosswalks. Pretty low cost items. Next slide. Set and maintain a word and line pavement marking in all of Jericho so that we repaint both September and March at a minimum stencils. Because if we believe those things are effective, then don't we want to be able to see them all year round? And right now they're gone already.
Do we still have that machine, Jacob, the stencil machine?
Yes. Repair broken signs and crosswalks, and this is what people see that are coming to our town and walk over to the store, right? The handicap plates, trip items, both sides of the road are broken. Our yield sign is in a mess, and the crosswalk has no visible crosswalk indication. So that's maintenance. Next slide, please. Install streetscaping. I've talked with Eric recently, walking down, we looked at some of the erosion in town. I think with the water issues that we're going to keep having, coming up with some creative ways for doing erosion control is something to think about. And plants with deep roots, they don't have to be that tall. Plants with thick fibrous roots, like spiderworts that have pretty flowers, might be something to think about. Next item is install curbs where the green belt is less than 3 feet. I know curbs are an issue for some people, but there are creative ways to do curbs. There are curbs that are rounded, that are more plow and bike friendly. Curb extensions, bulb outs. The thought was, and this is a bit of a stretch, but the oak trees on the left over here. So the parking lot where the people park from stores over here and the crosswalk right there. My thought was, is there a way to move that crosswalk a little bit further? Because that line of sight is fairly short. So if we put where the oak tree is here, if we put a little bulb out, which would narrow the road to a 9-foot side on that side, it would mean less distance for people to cross where they're actually in the road. And they would have just a short distance to walk from the parking lot. There's some issues with that potentially worked out, but that's a rough idea of what it looked like in Burlington. The bulb out is a dotted area. You can see where the crosswalk now is shorter. Go to the next slide. Again, another idea of what the bulb out is, sort of narrowing the road by that green area and narrowing the cross area. Next slide. So next one is data-driven speed enforcement guidance to the sheriff. Right now, the budget for the sheriff is for fiscal year 26 is $190,000. That's 50 hours of work a week. Returns fines about $60,000. So we're talking $73 an hour we're paying them. If we're going to use radars as speed controls, I said earlier, we should make it as efficient and effective as possible to reduce non-compliance and to save money through data-driven speed enforcement guidance. So one Vermont Police Department, I won't go through the details, but they tried this and they felt it was effective. They couldn't give me factual numbers, but they felt that they had seen improvements. So what proposal is direct or request the sheriff to locations and times of greatest speed limit variance as shown on the report and others. For example, the CCRCP report. This is a pullout of the data that they sent us for the 45 to 50 mile an hour times, days and hours. And you can notice particularly that on the right side, that's the southbound, the south portion of Brown Trace. This is the north portion. For some reason, people are speeding faster and more often on this portion of the road. And the red items are telling you where the greatest benefit for the sheriff to be sitting are in those red zones, because those are the faster speeds. So right away, you can pick 3 or 4 days and 3 or 4 hours and say, that's where we want you prime time. And we could do that at any of the speeds, and we could do that at any of the places where we had the data. But the point is, this is just one example of ways we could better efficiently use the data we're getting from these reports from CCRCP. The other request is to have the sheriff tell us annually, ticket information, tell us the date of the speed violation, the vehicle type, the commercial or residential, the vehicle ticketed speed, the road speed limit for that section, the time of the violation, then share that as a summary at the town meeting. So we know what we're paying for and what we're getting out of what we're paying for and whether we're making any headway. Again, let's understand the data and pass it back to the residents. Calculate the number of tickets issued to commercial vehicles, compare it to the percentage of commercial vehicles that are in the traffic to determine, are they receiving the same scrutiny as residential drivers? Now, people have told me anecdotally they don't believe they are, but that doesn't mean anything to me. I want to see the data. And if they're not, then we need to talk to the sheriff and understand why not. Next slide, please. So there's another item is a small dollar item was ask for an allocation of funds for the PACE car program, which is the national program that provides bumper stickers and a safe driver pledge. The 10th item is position the fog lines to create a 3-foot shoulder on both sides of the road where the road's wide enough to accommodate it, particularly in the 24-mile-an-hour section. So I think this is a reasoned, data-backed, and detailed plan for physical, perceptual speed control tactics to influence self-governed driving behavior with a consistent show of intent. I think we can influence driving behavior to ensure we have slower and safer streets. Now, people ask me, but that's one neighborhood. How are the other neighborhoods? How's the select board going to decide for other neighborhoods to come forward with their speeding issues and their particular ways they want to address it? What criteria might the select board use to determine which proposals for which neighborhoods, and which do we say no to, which do we say and show that we have a process to say, here's why we said yes or no. So one Jericho resident suggested these criteria. Is it an area within village centers in a half mile or within a half-mile radius? Are there sidewalks in the area? Is there support from residents? And you brought this up earlier. Are there support from residents who live in the immediate area? Is that a strong support, a weak support, opposed? What's the intensity of the speeding in the area as measured by the number of speeders and the miles per hour and other metrics? What's the level of current and desired public and pedestrian activity in the area? Church, school, playground, studio. Again, back to the town plan comments about what we want for our community centers, for our village centers. What's the projected cost and complexity and scale? How easy it? How hard is it? Expensive? What efforts need to be applied? Are there calming techniques in place already, which really, need repair, like some that we've shown, or are there some already in place which need supplements, or are we starting from scratch? So the summary, the ask summary is as follows. Implement the following concepts for speed control augmentation for safer people, roads, and speeds. 1, 2 median islands. 2, 3 raised crosswalks. 3, a lane or street narrowing via paint or physical items. Maintenance, again, not a new item. Biannual pavement markings and repairs in front of the JCS parking lot lines. Reinstate the portable pedestrians standalone signs that we did have at one point in time and disappeared, I guess. Install curbs where their green belt is narrow, or come up with some other creative way to provide a both physical and perceptual safety zone when people are walking on the sidewalk and the narrow green is less than that wide. I mean, you're that far from the road when you're on the sidewalk. Data-driven speed enforcement, as I just mentioned, guidance to the sheriff and obtaining the annual speed violation detailed report. 7, check to see if there's an availability of software on our digital signs to measure speed compliance. Then we wouldn't have to go to CCRPC every 3-4 years and say, okay, test what the speed is. That would tell us every day if we wanted it. 8, an allocation for the funds for bumper stickers. 9, 3 to 4 foot shoulders via fog lines. 10, update Jericho's 2015 transportation plans. My understanding is we set aside money to do that, but as far as I know, that's still has not been done. So those are 10 elements. I'll mention one that's outside the scope of the presentation, but for future attention, speeding countermeasures campaign, messaging to influence behavior and education. And maybe starting at the high school would be a good place, not to pick on the high school. Keep in mind that Jericho Center, as I've been told, would be a good candidate, particularly for an AARP Community Challenge Grant for speed control features. So in conclusion, finally, but there are other grants that we've talked about. Let's not ever give up on the potential free money, right? I mean, I'm not saying they're there or they're not, but let's not put a blind eye to them. So in conclusion, very short, finally, I've offered you, I think, a thorough understanding of the need. I've referenced many dialogues that have been in the select board, and that's in the package, the actual dialogue that over the last 5 years, the public desire and the speed control features. This request is for a thoughtful, comprehensive commitment to safer streets across Jericho. The proposal is community driven, it's evidence based, and it directly aligns with the town's stated visions and values. The select board is urged to take leadership by approving the full suite of safety measures and setting the stage for effective implementation. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I feel like that is plus.
I'm sorry to have to cover so much. I kept trying to say, how can I cut it down? But I think, unfortunately, with all the people that have come to me with pokes at it, I said, the answer's in here, but if you don't want to take time to get into detail, then I don't know how to have a discussion with you. So I apologize for taking a lot of time, but I
appreciate the amount of work that.
This is like revision 1, and this is like revision 178. I'm not kidding you, because as people came to me, these are, this is my presentation to you. But this is a lot of voices, a lot of people, you know, I kept making changes and when people gave me input and say, yeah, that's a good thought. And I hadn't thought of that way to look at it. And obviously a ton of research into, you know, I said from the beginning, when I talk with folks, we're not going to entertain ideas that it sounds like a good idea to any person, but it's not been vetted by the state or the federal government or shown to be that it's effective. I said, we got to narrow this down. And I feel like we've really vetted this to a tight, and that's why I asked you to consider the suite if possible.
I'd like to open up to the select board. What questions do you have? Kathleen, Peter?
Well, it's interesting, based on the RPC report that one of the, I mean, there's some things that are fairly simple and fairly, costly, you know, that are least costly to implement, in a very quick manner. And, I mean, this is incredible work, there's no question about it. But we need, once it starts getting the cost higher, we need to be able to prioritize, because that was one of the big pushbacks on that 30,000 for safety, is that people were concerned it would be just going to Jericho Center. And so we need to be able to do what we can for the center, but then be able to spend money on, you know, some other neighborhood or something like that. But one of the, and I'm sure you saw this in the report for me, but they didn't like your greenery.
And I think I've responded to that, and I can certainly talk to it if you like me to.
No, I mean, I just thought it was, you know, kind of counterintuitive because, you know, we did have a communication that, yeah, the greenery slows people down and makes, you know, it looks like a residential area.
Mhm.
And others saying, you know, you gotta move, we do have to, I think we do need to move the speed sign closer to Plains Road, because it used to be down that way. And, but then they say, cut the greenery. And I thought, well, Bernie's not gonna like that one.
Well,
Yeah, let's not get into the greenery. cutting.
Let's just let that lie.
No,
Let's just
I figured- that's what I figured it better. you
Yeah,
know,
let's just move.
We just thought because I knew that he wouldn't like that one.
Well, it's not about me liking or disliking
No, but
something.
it's
It's
just
too-
kind of counterintuitive what you're talking about.
It's getting into the details.
Anyway,
I've seen you.
please continue your train of thought. You were getting up to a good point, I think.
No, but what's interesting is from the report from the RPC, they had seen it before we had painted the 25. Because the picture, they didn't have the 25, they also didn't have the fog lines. But
You painted 25 since then?
yes, was painted, but it's, you know,
Wait.
when they did it in
Like
the
this
last year,
Okay.
this is when they took their pictures.
Okay.
It was painted, it's now fading, and that's why Bernie said, it should try it twice a year. I don't know what, the timelines for the road crew would be under those kind of conditions.
Yep.
But, there's also a thing, what's interesting, some of the bikers have complained about wide fog lines because it's slippery for them.
Again, it's devil's in the details. There are options to address that. I've talked with the bike and ped crew. Again, any of these I can get into more detail, but I think if we start trying to crawl through that minutia, we're gonna be here another hour.
Okay.
I'll talk to them if you like, but
No.
I understand there's none of these that are perfect. And every one of these, as I've talked to a number of people, if I would have said, okay, since somebody doesn't come up with a problem with this, and I gotta scratch that one off, I wouldn't have had anything to come here with you for. But it's not to say that I've ignored those. I've gone back and said, okay, how can I mitigate those concerns? Phil told me that very early about the 4-inch, so I was well aware of that.
Yeah.
And again, I've researched and think there are things to mitigate that. I don't think 4-inch is necessary to begin with. But if we wanted to go the 4-inch, there's things to talk about what we could do to alleviate the concern for them.
The things that I find most compelling, the things that I find the least compelling are paint. I went down, I drove down Cochrane Road today, which I never normally on, and they've got significant speed bumps there, or the speed tables or bumps, whatever they are, and you slow down or you pay the price on your car.
Those are more bumps than.
So I like those. And as I was driving, I was thinking about Jericho Center, and I was thinking, yeah, I think it would be having one of those at the, depending where you're going, the entry to each side of Jericho Center, especially if the dollar amount that Bernie's talking about, that seems like a pretty easy thing, a pretty easy, effective thing to do. What the other thing that Richmond does is they have a huge speed bump sign and they have a bunch of paint leading up to it and coming off of it. I find that paint, unless it gets renewed pretty frequently, pretty much any paint, I feel like goes, the select board back then moved the lines in on Brown's Trace and people ignored them and rode over them and they went away pretty quick. So it feels to me, I'm more interested in physical things where you have to do something or you're really compelled to do something, like the cutouts where the road gets much narrower and it's whatever, 9 feet or whatever, and you naturally slow down. You even think about it, you think, oh, I'm arriving at something, I need to slow down here. So those are the things that I find most compelling. I do share Catherine's concern that I feel like that vote at the town meeting could have gone either way, and I think what tipped it towards a positive was when the original motion, which I think said Jericho Center, was then sort of adjusted to say all of Jericho, and then it passed. And so I think we need to not spend $30,000 on Jericho Center, but I think there are some significant things we can do for not a ton of money and have a pretty significant impact on Jericho Center. Bernie's done a ton of work.
It's a ton of work.
And I would suggest the process is the cornerstone of this project, so that it is fair to every community. Because the process says that we don't look at just Jericho Center.
Well, Raceway doesn't want anything, so we can drop them off the list, so we can see it. They don't, they literally don't.
But there are some, and that's my point, is each unique
Some parts
one.
now want cars slower and some don't.
And what they want to do, the slowness, right, is gonna be different. So people in
They
government.
want to slow down and they just don't want that.
So if you do nothing else, I hope you take a look at those ideas on setting up a defined process. Because if people see that there's a specific, well, at least I know, I may not like the answer, but at least I know, and that's what Burlington does. They have a flow diagram and they say, if you get by here, okay, it goes. If you don't, you go over here. So they know if it's an individual or it's a community going forward, they know how the decision is going to get made. Then I think we get out of this, because we're never going to get anything done if we just battle one community against the other. Who's ever going to get started? Who's ever going to get any work done?
I feel that.
Yeah.
But seriously, I'm not being snarky or facetious, like a community that is clearly come together and says they want this, that feels appropriate to be responding to that.
Yeah. So I went to, I got a chance to walk, well, 2 times in the last week. I went up to Jericho Center. The first one, I ordered a sandwich at a particularly busy time, so I was there for a little longer than I had expected to be. And I will just say, like, when I was in high school, I worked at Dessos, and again, probably my best job yet. It's so much busier and faster than those days. You all know that.
5,000 cars a day.
Yeah, and so some of those numbers vetted that out, and then I walked down. My daughter and I walked down from whatever Dessos is called now down to Plains Road and back. And it definitely did, like, all right, I'm starting to feel some of this, like the speed of which people are going by and the, what probably our little heart of the center should feel like is starting to not feel that way. So I've definitely come around to where I was thinking maybe around town meeting time, where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's already so slow through there. I can't imagine making people go slower. That's where I was, I'm being honest. And now I'm like, yeah, we probably do go pretty fast through there. It's pretty tough. We make like 6 trips through that center now.
And again, the data takes it out of what we think is going on versus the data tells us what really is happening, right? On an average basis, we just got to look at the numbers.
And so I do like some of these, and I like some of these for Jericho Center, because I think if you're gonna slow people down, you gotta start there. Yes, people are too fast on Skunk Hollow and literally every, I mean, I say this every time we talk about speeding. I live like 100 feet from an intersection where in theory people should be stopped and they're going 50 by the time they get by me. I mean, it's impressive.
That's why that's a bad intersection.
Yeah, and so anyway, every road has a problem, but I do think that starting in Jericho Center, one, it's one of our 3 centers that we control the road, right?
Right.
It's not a state road, we can do it. So I like that. The other thing I really like about what Bernie's proposing, and I think we can ask staff to at least come up with something to propose, is the intake process. Because I think having something that says, hey, well,
I mean, writing it.
Criteria.
so right now, if you've got a problem with your road, you
Oh,
come yell at Peter or
Yeah.
call or whatever. And so what I mean by intake process is like a complaint intake. Hey, you know,
This is their problem.
this has been an issue, and then we have some things to check off and, you know, because people I keep hearing there's not a process. I sort of hate having a process for every little thing, like, oh, you told me I can't complain about a road without filling out a form. I don't really like that either. But I do think that, like, okay, but if you're serious about it, here's some things we look for, and we come up with whatever those meaningful things are, and then we kind of have a log of it, and then we could then set up a select board meeting where we're like, okay, we're gonna go through some of the stuff, and we're gonna consider it. Hey, sorry, there's nothing to do about that one, or yeah, hey, there is something we can do about that one. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
That one's kind of free, other than spending maybe some staff time to come up with looking at what some other towns have. Should we try to like come up with something to do tonight on these, or are we just kind of like, yeah, and then we gotta, I guess I don't know what we.
Well,
do
I think the crosswalk across from the store is important because it is in tough shape.
That's a great point. I do think. I think I'm gonna ask Jacob.
Yeah.
Could we, like, what's our schedule like? Could we get some maintenance on that on that area, like to some of the things he said, like and then I have another question about the lines, but like whether it's the striping machine, maybe like I don't know, adding something to that hump that's kind of flattened out over the, like, could we dedicate some highway crew time to the center to just not change anything? We probably will change some things, but to just fix what's there.
It's,
Okay.
I think the speed sign should be moved down to closer to Plains Road anyway.
Yeah.
Because that used to slow people down a little bit.
right.
I would propose that we deputize Paula and Jacob to sit down. They've both been sitting here and I've heard this whole conversation.
Right, and for stuff like that, they can.
But it
that's
is,
on them.
I just want to clarify, and I'm just saying, right? We have 5 highway guys. We are down to 4, right? And we have 4 huge FEMA projects. I'm not excusing
Right, but
the
I did
speed
ask him,
bumps.
and he said
I'm
yes.
not excusing, like, we've been up to Brent's and we have discussed your problem. It's not a day that we can just go up and fix it. It's a huge problem. We are losing lots of material, right? So all of these things, you got 4 guys and you need at least 4 guys to go up and fix Silly Hill. I'm just trying to explain like the understanding of, I get the importance of these things. Prioritizing is another thing.
Yes.
Like, you cannot rip Jacob off and have 2 guys doing this or 4 guys doing that or 1 guy doing this. You know, it is hard.
This thing to Leary Road because it's flooded again.
Yeah, we are totally constantly in just a whirlwind of it. We're just barely keeping up with the paces. I mean, Brent has a good reason to come in and complain, right? That is a huge issue. Huge. We're losing a lot of expensive material.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Right? And we have to fix that. And so you are definitely, I
Yeah,
had told
wanna
Jacob
put a
you
pause
were on
right there.
priority.
I am in no way, by supporting doing this maintenance, disparaging our road crew, who is extremely busy. And
Yeah.
extremely well.
I mean,
staffed.
we can
But-
fit
but
this
we-
in somewhere, yes.
My next question is, when we talked about striping before, it was a few years back, and I feel like things were still post-COVID and parks and whatever. is it hard to get things striped? I know Peter's not a big fan of the striping, but like, if we
Like
decide
fog
to do the
lines
line,
could,
is it
fog
hard?
lines could be done, right? We could hire that out. It's gonna cost about $20,000 to do the fog lines,
Just in the center.
all over,
Okay.
right? I mean, there's Skunk Hollow, there's people on Skunk
Right.
Hollow who want it, right? So doing that fog lines, the state comes in and does the double yellow lines on the class 2 roads. So which is Brown's Trace, Barber Farm, Governor Peck, I think.
Lee River.
Yes,
What's interesting, last year
Through
they
main
did
arteries.
they did the whole package.
right.
All I was really, I'm not solving it right now. I just want to know. When we tried this before, the line striping companies were so far out, it was pointless to talk about it. We couldn't even get on their list.
Yeah,
Is
and I
that
don't know
better?
that, I don't know that answer. I don't know if they're very busy or what. We can totally look into that.
I'd like to look into that. The other point I was gonna make.
You're talking about just fog lines right now? You're talking about the lines, we're talking about like in the middle of like
Yeah,
leading
but
up.
the fog,
leading
I
up
feel
to-
like the fog lines we have to hire out. And sometimes you just can't. So like, I don't wanna.
We did have a
an outcome
company.
Be like, oh, we're gonna do it, and then find out like, well, we can't even do it.
9
So,
months.
Yeah, we
so-
did have a company that came in and did like stop bar, yield bars, the crosswalks. We did have,
Okay.
That's what I struggle with, is to come to you and say, well, I'm asking you to do these things. I feel like it's the wrong, maybe not the optimum way, because number one, it ties up a bunch of your time getting into
Yeah.
detail. And number two, some of these things, I prefer that you'd say, we're gonna commit to try to do these without saying we're definitely gonna do them.
Okay.
Because we know that Bernie's giving us 80%, but there's still the 20% to work out.
Mm.
All the things that we talked about before about who's gonna do it, what's the timeline? Have we looked at other neighborhoods to see make sure this is priority versus other towns? I'm trying to help you develop a process that says you don't get hung up with a ton of minutia, right? By the time it gets to you, it's a high level decision, and it fits our goals and our target, and I can see you prioritize, and you come up, crunched all the numbers, and you figured out who could do it, and then you just sign off yes or no. Versus some people come to this meeting and you're trying to work through, and you're trying to be technicians, and you're trying to do his job, or he's trying to, work with you at the meeting, and that's just not gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to lead, kind of say,
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what
can you see this as a?
a motion to like move this forward? Or do we
We have $30,000 that we need to spend on speeding, and I think we should ask Paula and Jacob to sit down with no one else in the room and have a
Right.
conversation honestly about what can a 4-man road crew do? And what's the low hanging fruit that's gonna make a quick difference in Jericho Center? And can that be done in the next 2 months? And if not, then we explain that and they do the minutia.
That's
What's
right.
that? Is that your motion?
Can I ask you one
Right,
thing before you make a
do the
motion?
Probably not.
No, no,
Probably
big-
not. I think it's direct.
Right, we can just do
Can I ask
that.
just one thing before I go?
Yeah.
To consider that this is a bigger problem than the 30K. I mean, I was really frustrated to say we had meetings to figure out how to spend the 30K. It's backwards.
I understand. That makes.
So can we look at some of these things across neighborhoods and start to think about when it gets time to budget process?
Mm-hmm.
To hopefully get people in there to say, okay, can you develop a process, come forward with what you think needs to be done, that your community agrees, that's what they want to do, but tell them well in advance, because it takes a long time to do this, and then by then they've had public meetings, with their neighborhood, and then they can come to you and say, okay, we need to put these things in the budget as a line item. I didn't like I don't like still getting pounded about that 30K, but it was the only,
We got pounded about it too.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the process the way it's supposed to be, is to put the need first, and then, okay, let's budget it out, and probably, okay, we can't do it this year, but we do it in year 3 or 4, but we've got to. Anyway, I think that's okay.
1 minute at the most.
1 minute.
Yep.
You need a public works commission of 3 skilled people. I just heard how you can't get this done, and there are volunteers with incredible skills in Jericho. And we put that speed bump in, it cost 36 grand, and it was done wrong. That's why it's compressed. It should have been made out of concrete, and for 36 grand, you could have gotten 4 of them done because you didn't have anybody involved in the process that knew what they were doing.
Point taken. Thank you, Jim. Okay.
30 seconds.
Well done, good for you. Well, that's noted.
Yeah.
No minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Thank you for you.
Okay. Review and approve CCRPC appointments for 2-year terms. I'll make a motion to appoint Catherine McMahon as the Board of Directors representative with the alternate being Peter Booth. I made the motion in that particular case because it felt weird having you guys do it.
We'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
I make a motion to appoint Jacob Johnson as our Transportation Advisory Committee representative and Tom Jocelyn as the Clean Water Advisory Committee representative.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
And the TAC is a very important committee, so I'm glad that Jacob's on there because that's the one that also talks about a whole lot of. grants and
yep.
A whole lot of stuff.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Great.
Okay.
Are you taking this one? How are we doing this one?
I
Sorry.
I
the agenda,
can-
I'll call the agenda item. The next
I can
agenda
take
item is
it.
To review and consider approval of Old Pump Road apron extension.
Right, let me just see if I'm doing this right. See, now I just can't get it because it just doesn't, there we go. Let's see if I can turn this, okay. Yeah, so we talked, you guys had talked a little bit about possibly, before the, Palmer Lane Maple came up, with all the parking issues and things, we talked about putting an apron in, and making that apron longer and possibly going to the red building of Palmer's. So we can do that. We could look into still doing that. I just wanted to let you know that Palmer's has presented to the DRB a parking area for the cars. Palmer's, you know, they are definitely working with the town to correct the issues of all of the parking issues that have been along Old Pump Road. So they came up with, this is what they've presented to the DRB, and which will be happening at the end of June.
What's the date on that?
On this one?
On the DRB.
Oh, the 25th?
Yes.
6th?
Wednesday.
No, it's,
Wednesdays?
yes,
they meet
yep,
on Wednesday.
yep.
25th.
Yep. And so,
Sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
So and I was the one who came up with the idea of like, let's get the apron back, let's get the apron back to the barn and
Yes.
put painting on there.
Yes,
put-
and delineate a crosswalk.
The road, whatever,
Mhm.
but that was all before.
Before
any of the
this,
parking Stuff
yep,
happened.
yes,
I think. That road is a mess. I've
Mhm.
driven by it, and if it's over
Mhm.
60 degrees, it's a disaster.
yeah,
With that in mind, I would like to, the apron preceded the parking lot. I
Yes.
would like to just kind of maybe stand down for 2 weeks and just see what happens with that parking lot and what the DRB says and what the community says about that and just sort of revisit that. That's, I don't know, that's not emotion or what.
Well,
folks are
actually, I was
feeling.
gonna say though, do we have to get the, is that part of a nice, asphalt bid, or is that, you know, or is that gonna be its own thing anyway for the, because, you know, the price could, you know, if you've got a whole lot of paving or, you know, asphalt.
But they're not gonna, will any action be will any action be taking place between now and the 25th? With.
well,
With
this,
the bridge?
yes, we do have the grant for the Old Pump Bridge,
Fantastic.
yes. So,
And I think Paul and I need to look at the details of that grant a little bit. But it may be possible to, for very similar money, get the bridge and the apron for what we were thinking about without even including the apron, like just the bridge. Now, we've got to like.
Yeah.
Understand the match and.
Yeah.
Some weird information.
yeah,
That's what I was
So-
wondering, because typically you can get a better deal if you have, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
or
Yeah.
paving done.
yeah, so I think this is great. I believe that we're seeing progress.
Yeah, I know this is going to DRB and we can't comment on it. The
Yeah.
only thing I want to comment on is, I appreciate Palmer's working
Taking
to
action.
do
Yes.
something.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
all I'll say.
Yep.
What are the, just for my own personal clarity, what are the communication rules about us and the DRB and?
I just try not to touch it with a 10-foot pole personally. I don't know what the rules are, but I just try to like stay out of my lane, and every now and then something will come and like ask for an exemption, like the thing that we blew off tonight.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the, other than that, I just try to stay clear, but I don't
It's
know.
better too because.
No, that makes sense. Okay, great.
Because sometimes the DRB then can feel that they're.
Hey, could you make this work or turn? this
Yeah,
way?
I don't want to, I don't want.
Right, right.
Now granted, with Chris Flynn there, he's not gonna let us influence much, you know.
Yeah.
Probably don't have much to worry about with the
Yeah.
particular ZA, but.
Right.
But I still try to not try to influence.
But I think I'm happy that the Palmers are working on something.
Yes.
I'm gonna break precedence. Mike and Deb, did you have a specific thing you were here for? I was assuming it was that.
Apron, and I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind the apron and where that came from and what was like.
It wasn't, it was,
It
oh,
was-
sorry, go ahead.
The idea, one of the, maybe the slightly easier things to fix of the whole parking situation there is that there's this feeling, if you don't live here, that you're not in a road.
Mm.
And so what we were thinking is if that were paved a little more and it had big bright yellow lines down the middle of it and white lines down the side, it might at least feel like you're standing in a road instead of just, you know, like I've done it too. You pull in and like people are just like pointing at the bird and you're like, okay, but I'm actually trying to get.
The idea was that with pavement, we can actually do some demarcation to say, this is not your parking lot.
Yeah, and I remember I was here for that meeting when it was discussed, so.
Yeah, that was
I do
like
remember that
4 or 5 months ago.
Part, there's.
We understand that's not the whole problem, but it hopefully is a problem, so.
So, and I think the parking lot, this is probably not the place for that discussion, but that's also going to cause a lot of discussion.
It will cause a lot of discussion, you're
So-
correct. Yeah.
Based on my email inbox, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I have to, I gotta like pay Google more now.
Yes,
for my-
yeah, they're gonna start charging me.
So thank you, Eric, for asking, and that's why we were here to figure out what the background was.
Mhm.
Thanks for coming to the meeting.
We
Good one.
You fixed it, good point.
We're ahead of the game for the liquor licenses.
You should both probably consider, we had two.
Yeah, 2 openings.
two-
For you, 2 openings.
She's leaving.
Thank you. All right, we'll make a motion to approve the liquor license for Griffin Riders on June 18th, June 19th, June 20th, and June 28th at Mansfield Barn. And a second-class liquor license and tobacco license for Sugar Flake Group doing business as Jericho Country Store. And Pizzeria Verite Incorporated for September 27th, 2025 at the Denison location, and the Sugar Grim LLC for October 4th, 2025 at La Porte Wedding on Field Lane.
I'll second.
And
that.
those, do you want to do those too?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to approve. Liquor application for waterfront yogurt and sandwich at Mansfield Barn on June 21st from 4 to 10 p.m.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Oh my God, we're there. Select-board updates, what do we got? Anything else to watch?
Peter's got his notebook.
My last day of teaching with students is tomorrow.
Yay,
Thank
congratulations.
you for your service to teaching for
Yeah, all those kids.
35.
35.
35.
I told my students, I've been in school, I said, very question. You know how that feeling every Sunday, you get up and you're like, I want to go to this fun thing, but I have homework to do. I'm gonna do the fun thing, but it will kind of be crappy because the homework in the back of my head ruining the whole thing. I said, I've been doing that since I was 7.
Oh,
I went from elementary
jeez.
school to high school to college, teaching out of college 3 days later. I've been in school since I was 7 years old.
Yeesh.
Thank you for doing that. Diminishing or increasing return?
Well, when they had a $30,000 buyout for my position.
Oh my
Congratulations.
Yes.
And guess what? We're gonna start throwing, right, Peter's right here
Yeah,
now.
Peter can do it.
You know, with that, and with these two, gentlemen, lady over here,
Quiet so far, but.
I was thinking about, seeing if you'd be interested in joining the wastewater committee.
Oh. Okay.
When we came up.
As well as the JCDC.
Yes, yes, he's already said yes.
Are you really dumb?
But so now we can both be on it, is what I'm saying, on wastewater, and I think with you living there and
Right.
you knowing people around and like literally hopefully knowing
Right.
positively, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
People that would literally be connecting to it, I think you're, if you feel like
Yeah.
every other, or one Wednesday a month, anyway, just. consider it.
Yeah. We can talk about that. Because the other thing I was thinking was, I guess where it's like, okay, I was thinking, because seriously, because I'm gonna have more time now, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll do the town meeting reimagined piece and be like a select board input on that, just so we can
Mhm.
Yeah,
have
I've been
direct.
doing that interview.
Oh, you've been doing that?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I've been the contact.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know that.
From the town meeting, from the very
Okay.
beginning,
Okay.
since I sent out the email to all the different people who've
Okay.
been involved.
So yeah, I think I can do that. I mean, think we can, now we can discuss that legally outside and just sort of get a sense of.
Yes, we can.
How it's
You're right.
regulating and all that. But yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, the only thing I had to say is that the weather could have been better for the big, energy EV event with Underhill,
Mm.
but,
Yeah,
yeah,
the one I saw there.
yeah, because there were fewer cars, in fact, as we had, at least we had the motorcycle, that was cool, and Andrew brought the rider lower that people could look at and go play with and stuff like that. So
Who came to the motorcycles? The guy who did the video? The guy who did the movie?
Yeah. Yeah. he was-
People riding it?
No, he was just talking about it. But, you know, he didn't like it. My favorite talking about it. But it was quite interesting in terms of, talking to, solid waste district and stuff about plastics and, composting as well, because these are big issues. And the Jericho Energy Task Force, got some booklets from, Bayview, Ontario, and how they, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the whole story
What's that
about how
about?
they did it. Which is pretty cool. And so I had 7 books that I could share. Somebody wanted to read it about plastics and how they.
You have to
the
do that.
community.
Oh.
Oh, this,
And now.
all right, I have an
Wait,
update we
you
have to
can,
make.
you can call this something, right?
This is super important and. So we had an error, I'm not saying what type of error it was, in the way that we worded. The article that was voted on for the 5-person select board, it's fine, it's still.
No,
passed.
Secretary of State says it's just, you have to announce it. It's just a word. It's just a
You can
word.
Update it, it's okay.
Nobody needs to vote on it.
No.
It just needs to just.
So I'm just gonna update and say that the article states, the legal voters of Jericho, Vermont are hereby notified and warned that the Australian ballot will vote on the article below.
Right.
Polls for voting by Australian ballot will be open on Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025, at Mount Mansfield Union High School from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., at which time polls will close. Thank you, whoever's listening.
But then you gotta say the bottom, right? The bottom is what the change,
That one-
right? Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
The legal voters of Jericho, Vermont are hereby notified and warned that the Jericho voters will vote by Australian ballot on the article below.
right, it said, it was the odd wording of,
On by.
yes,
Australian ballot.
yep,
I
yep,
didn't
yep,
call
thank
this
you.
week to do it, so rub it in, hope it go away, I hope it would. It's like, hey,
Well, on that note, maybe we should just reiterate that we are looking
Yep.
for letters of interest for the select board positions. We're taking those until Tuesday, June 24th at the town hall here. Letters can be addressed or emailed to me, myself, at pcarrier@jericovt.gov, or bring them in and drop them off. And then on the 26th, we'll do interviews on June 26th.
I'm glad you brought that up because I totally forgot that we do need to talk about that. We need to discuss how we're gonna do it. What we did last time, this came up, is even though this is a public meeting, we felt that it was not fair to the people that went first to, right, like, so let's say we interview 7 people, right? We interview
Number 7 knows the first 6 said.
Right, and so we have asked them to
Not sure.
not be in the room for that. That's how we did it last time.
Yeah.
We're on the board
Yep.
now. I think that went well. It does feel a little weird to say you can't be at a public meeting. But maybe we should ask the participants if they would be willing.
Request they not come, but if you insist to come, you can come.
And then you just don't get voted in.
Because you can't pay attention.
Right. Anyway, I think we just ask people to do that, just because it's just weird to sit there and just, yeah.
Keep it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is we had a standard group of questions too. There was.
Oh, yeah, we probably need to come up with those.
There were some basic questions and then of course we can follow up,
I can try to locate those. I think I can.
I have a question about I think it was the last meetings, the guy from Rutland with the motion.
Yeah.
Do we have to sign a document?
Oh, you got it.
Oh, we do.
That was gonna be my next one.
I'm back to my forgetting pens thing again.
Oh, Lord.
Then they made the motion.
Yes,
Oh,
that,
sorry.
you
Next
can just sign that. That doesn't need to be, and then we'll put that in there. Well, I have, I think that's it. I'm good. That's it.
So we sign warrants. We
Yep.
approve the meeting minutes.
Yeah, don't do the minutes because Eric has my pen, so, wait till he gets done signing the warrants.
Usually I have like 4 pens.
I had like 4 in my bag, and now they're all gone.
Am I right? We have 2 sets of minutes,
Yes,
15 and 23.
yep,
Remember that short little select board meeting that I forgot about?
yes.
Gotta be able to, it's hard, but I can't like merge stuff onto my work stuff, you know what I mean? So I have to have 2, yeah, so I have to have 2 calendars going, and-
Oh, gosh. Oh, thanks, Peter.
Okay, there it is.
Thank you.
Right, minutes.
Okay.
Minutes from the 15th, I was okay with. I had nothing.
On line 163 on the 15th, I think if you're going to say, public information consultant Tony Pelli provided her contact information and an email address that can be used to sign up for project update emails. That information should be in the minutes.
What information? Her email?
For contact
Her
information.
contact
Okay.
and email address, because
Since
people
it's
are
supposed to
gonna-
be for.
Yep.
people like giving that update
for
to
the real,
public.
Yep.
Public specifically.
otherwise I'm fine. So
Oh my gosh, you two missed the biggest, I'm so proud of myself. I finally caught
No.
something. There are some huge.
Multiple?
In this?
multiple, Yes.
Oh, my, Catherine.
It's very subtle and it's a very easy mistake to make, but it is a big deal. So around line 272,
Oh, let me get it.
whoever was doing the minutes, I'm sorry, I forget her name.
Yep, Donna.
Donna,
272.
she conflated Leslie and Lindsay. Because Lindsay Hallman,
Oh, Lindsay.
but before Lindsay Hallman's thing, Leslie Nolte spoke. And so Leslie was in the minutes there, But from,
272, 276.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it
so
says Leslie's there's potential, so it's Lindley.
so yeah, I got 272. Oh, I missed the 276 one. I have 272, 282, 287.
Oh, hey, hold on.
Wait, that's very
Wow,
cool.
Eric, all right.
I cannot
Wow, that's
believe
terrific.
it. 282.
287.
282,
Okay. Yep.
308.
308, wow.
Dang. Okay.
That's a great, I mean, that's a major one.
314.
3, 4. Oh my
I have
gosh.
so few wins, Brent. I gotta celebrate them, okay?
3.
At 9:39.
And 345.
345.
Right.
Eric. I cannot believe that.
Now-
Okay.
Now, there's another one. I don't know the protocol for this, but I misspoke.
You misspoke.
And I don't know how to fix that because what's captured is what I really did say. And I said the wrong thing. So I
So
don't.
what number, what, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll explain it. So on 469,
Hold on. 469. Yep.
Eric said he doesn't feel doesn't feel the need for the town to have the money up front before applying for the grant.
oh yeah. That was a different one than I'm thinking of. Sorry, 469, that was a different thing that I'm talking about. That one, I think it says. Yeah, it says he doesn't feel the need for the town to give up the money up front. What I should have said, or what I think I said is, I didn't need the residents that had the match to put the
Mhm.
money up first.
Mhm.
We don't want them to put the money up first and then not get the grant.
Have the residents.
I
Yeah,
think
so that's what I had
And
intended.
I think that that's the intention of what's written, it's just not
Well,
phrased
I
well.
wondered that.
Yeah.
Like, Eric doesn't feel that the town needs to receive the money from the residents.
Right.
Front. Like
Half
town
the
to
money.
have the
Half,
money.
yeah, okay, so
Means
maybe that
like
one.
receive, but it's much clearer to say, receive the money from the residents up front.
Okay,
Yeah.
need
But clearly it was your intention. That's what
Yep.
you read.
need to receive.
We don't need to receive.
Eric said he doesn't feel the need for the town to receive the money from the residents, and I would cross out up front and just say before applying for the grant.
Okay, where I was talking about where I misspoke was on line 91, which
Oh,
is,
What number again?
91.
It's talking about.
so there,
Oh, I wasn't at this meeting.
yeah, maybe it was something 91.
Ninety-one?
Sorry,
Where's
so
the-
anyways, we were talking about paving. And I was talking about Aldinger Drive. And I said that Chuck had told me,
No, that's the other meeting.
That's the other.
oh, okay,
That's
all
fine.
right, that's right,
Okay,
all right.
okay, so this one is good after all that, after
Okay,
those?
so I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes and May 15th, 2025 with corrections that noted.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, and then, oh, you're right. So then this one is the one, line 91.
Yeah, I got a couple things in this one.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah, so I don't know how to fix that.
Where is it, 91?
91, Eric said Chuck Lacy sent an email about Aldinger pointing out blah, blah, blah. I don't know if we could just put like in parentheses after that sentence that says Eric was mistaken, the email was about Alpine Drive, not Aldinger. I think it's worth correcting that in the minutes because they're gonna be there forever.
Yes, that's-
so instead of saying about Aldinger, you're saying Alpine.
No, I said Aldinger.
said-
So
Oh,
Aldinger is one of
oh.
the things that we're gonna pave.
Yeah,
But I had recently got an email from Chuck and I just mixed them up.
Conflated those two.
And so I was,
That's what you actually said, but you were misspoken.
Right, that's
Announced in
wrong.
the history.
yeah, and I don't know what to do with that because that is what was said. I'm not looking to like
Well,
rewrite what I
Well,
said.
but we're amending the minutes.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
So
you
we
can
just put in
amend the
parentheses
minutes to
and
put-
say, hey, Eric
And
was.
the person who
was-
Amended June 12th, Eric misspoke. The email from Chuck was in reference to Alpine Drive.
No, yeah, something like
And
that.
that's just
We
a
could
note
put
in
that
there,
there.
we're amending it, if you
Exactly.
want.
Yeah.
We could just say Eric was wrong. Eric was
Yeah,
wrong.
if you did that, that would be way
Dot,
too
dot,
frequent,
dot.
yeah. Okay, that was the only one I had for that.
Okay,
Actually,
anybody?
I had not, actually, I'm realizing I had questions, but not
Yep.
changes.
Mm-hmm.
On line 70. It says the project cost increase not to exceed 10% annually within the next 5 years. Did you confirm that?
Yeah, it's only 5%.
Okay.
Yes, good job.
And then the other thing was, just the idea of kicking the idea of a model HOA to the DRB.
Yeah.
So that we can, so that, or not, maybe, someone.
We did talk about that, yeah.
But do we, if anything happened, we need to do something about that, like say, we talked about, in the meeting, we talked about, hey, we should have like a model HOA, develop in our town, hey, here's the HOA we love.
But that's outside the
Right,
minutes,
you-
right?
What's that? Yes, that's, I reading the minutes, I was like, oh, wait, what are we doing about that? But yes, it's outside the minutes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have no amendments to the minutes, they look perfect, thank you, Don.
Okay.
That's right, I agree.
I meant to say.
I move to approve the select board meeting minutes of May 23rd, 2025. As
No,
of,
they were amended.
Yeah.
Oh, they were, okay, I'm.
I'm gonna shut up.
All those in favor say aye.
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 okay. Do we have an executive session? I have something I'd like to.
Yeah, go ahead. We can definitely go into,
About an hour and a half earlier than.
What's it? What's the
yes.
topic?
It would be, it would be legal.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of legal, because premature disclosure of information would be detrimental to the parties involved, and I'd like to invite Paul Carrier.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, good night.